Chapter 1780. Grandfather Yi didn't quite understand what he was saying. He mumbled, "Zhenhua, have you paid the water and electricity bills?" Shinjulia didn't understand what Grandfather Yi was saying either. After a while, it was finally Yi Zhenhua who answered the phone. Shinjulia heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Uncle Yi, it's been a while. I'm Shinjulia." "Oh. Shin, what's up?" Shinjulia would usually call home, but it was mostly to say hello. However, he rarely called in the afternoon. "It's like this, Uncle Yi. Qianqian's friend, Tong Tong, has returned to Yin Town, but her phone seems to be switched off. I wanted to ask you to pay attention. If she returns, please give me a call. Qianqian is worried." Yi Zhenhua didn't suspect anything. He nodded and said, "I thought it was something serious. Okay, I'll go take a look later. If she returns, I'll ask her to give you a call, okay?" "Okay. Thank you, Uncle." Shinjulia heaved a sigh of relief and began to greet Yi Zhenhua. After asking about the general situation and saying that he would visit often, Shinjulia hung up the phone. The source of this incident was Feng Tongtong. He had to find out what Feng Tongtong had said. However, Yi Zhenhua was Qianqian's father. He absolutely couldn't let Yi Zhenhua know that he had quarreled with Qianqian. At this critical juncture, any mistake would be fatal. Shinjulia didn't want to lose, and he couldn't lose. By the time Feng Tongtong returned to Yin Town, it was already night time. As soon as she got home, she was nagged by her mother. Although Mrs. Feng was nagging, she still doted on her daughter. She said, "Don't play for so long after you're back. By the way, why is your phone switched off?" When Feng Tongtong heard that, she casually found an excuse and said, "It's out of battery." "Oh, then what were you doing earlier? Didn't you know to charge your phone?" Mrs. Feng rebuked her and waved her hand. "Qianqian can't get through to you. She's anxious now. You should call her now to let her know that you're safe." "How did you know?" Feng Tongtong looked at her mother. "Will Qianqian still look for me at this time?" "Why wouldn't she? You just came back from Kingstown. Isn't it normal for Qianqian to call to find out if you're safe?" Mrs. Feng sighed and said, "In my opinion, Qianqian is a reliable child. She has been pretty since she was young, has a wild personality, and is very smart. Now she's a leader in a big company in a big city. She's really amazing. The boyfriend she found is also top-notch. He's handsome and rich. The two daughters of the Yi family are both blessed with good lives." When Feng Tongtong heard that, she felt upset. She snapped, "If she's that good, why don't you acknowledge her as your daughter?" "I want to. Who asked you to be so disappointing? You still haven't found a partner for me." "Oh, by the way, did you know that your junior high school classmate, the guy who always said he wanted to marry you, is back? Oh, he's so handsome. You mean Wang Jincheng?" Yes, it's that young man. I heard that he worked in a farm after graduating from university. Now he plans to come back and work on his own. He came back with his father. It's just that his father's brain hasn't been working well for the past 2 years. How could this be? What's wrong with his brain?" Chapter 1781. Pfft. Feng Tongtong choked. "No way. Did he go out and mess around? Well, he raped that woman. She's already in her 40s or 50s, and her son is already in college. Now that something like this happened, he's going to lose all his dignity." Mrs. Feng was a little sympathetic. "But Wang Jincheng is a pretty good guy. He's young and promising. His father's health is getting worse, and he doesn't have many years left." Hey, what do you mean?" Feng Tongtong felt goosebumps all over her body. "Are you planning to arrange a blind date with this guy?" "Why not? But he just came back not long ago, and I haven't had the time to visit him. It would be awkward if he's not single. If he's single, since he used to like you, you can ask him out to meet you. You already know him, and there's some foundation. It's different from other blind dates." Feng Tongtong was speechless and said in annoyance, "Are you that worried that your daughter won't be able to get married?" "That's right. I used to think that Yi Qianqian would never be able to find a boyfriend, because she was even more unruly than you. In the end, she's grown up and found a boyfriend who's so handsome and outstanding. Look. Can you do it? So what if he's outstanding? They still broke up. Fong Tongtong sat on the chair and lowered her head to turn on her phone. Mrs. Fong was shocked when she heard that. They broke up? How is that possible? Doesn't that guy like Qianqian very much? How could they break up? Can't Yi Qianqian dump him herself? Fong Tongtong said in annoyance. Besides, it's up to you. A mother wants to get married, and a man wants to cheat. No one can stop him. That can't be. That guy looks like a decent man. How could he cheat? Why not? Yi Qianqian is so boorish and doesn't act like a girl at all. Why would a man covet her? It's only right that they broke up. Shoo shoo shoo. Qianqian is a good person. She looks fierce, but she's just a paper tiger. It's not like you don't know her. How could she be cheated on? Mrs. Fong clapped her hands. No, you have to scold that guy. Hey, why are you so agitated? How can you not be excited? Qianqian is such a good girl. Aren't you worried that she has cheated on you? Fong Tongtong was speechless. Forget it, forget it. I was just joking. Look at how nervous you are. You treat her like your daughter, but she chased your daughter out of her house. Do you know that? Really? Of course it's true. Why else would I come back? Fong Tongtong looked aggrieved. Forget it. You don't believe me anyway. If you believe Yi Qianqian, you can treat her like your daughter. As she spoke, she stood up and prepared to leave. Madame Fong said anxiously. What? Did her boyfriend cheat on her and take it out on you? It's normal for him to be in a bad mood. Just give way and he'll be fine. Fong Tongtong felt even more aggrieved. She looked like she was on the verge of tears as she choked out. You don't know anything at all. She chased me away because she thought I seduced her boyfriend. Mrs. Fong turned pale with fright. How is that possible? My daughter isn't that kind of person at all. Did Yi Qianqian really say that? Chapter 1782. Mrs. Fong's expression darkened when she heard that. What do you mean? Tell me everything. Fong Tongtong wiped her tears. Forget it. You don't believe me anyway. You've always liked Yi Qianqian. What nonsense are you talking about? You're my daughter. Tell me. Fong Tongtong sobbed as she recounted the incident. Old Shun is a doctor. You know that the doctor-patient relationship has been tense over the years. She changed a few small details, but the general content was still the same. However, Fong Tongtong automatically ignored the words she said to Yi Qianqian that night, as well as the last phone call with Yi Qianqian. That's it. After Yi Qianqian slapped Old Shun, she left. Old Shun's wound recovered, but what does that have to do with me? I didn't do anything. Moreover, Old Shun treats me well. How can I betray him? That's right. Yi Qianqian is becoming more and more outrageous. Mom, I still have the chat records here. Look at Yi Qianqian's attitude toward me. Is this the attitude she would have toward a friend? To think that I treated her as my best friend. I'm so angry. Fong Tongtong picked up the phone and handed it to her mother. However, what Mrs. Fong didn't know was that the chat records were not complete. Fong Tongtong cleverly deleted a few sentences, making it seem as if Yi Qianqian was being aggressive. Mrs. Fong was furious. That's too much. Then why did she call you? I didn't think much of it when her father told me. But now it seems that Yi Qianqian wants to settle the score with you. That's why I didn't dare to turn my phone on. Mom sobbed. I feel so wronged. I really treated Yi Qianqian as a good friend, but I didn't expect her to treat me like this. She indiscriminately slandered me and even slandered her boyfriend. Don't cry. Mom will avenge you. If Mrs. Fong could raise Fong Tongtong to such a character, she must be very capable herself. She rolled up her sleeves and took the phone from Fong Tongtong. When she opened the call records, she saw a few more missed calls. Old Shun. Old Shun called you. Mrs. Fong was a little surprised. Isn't Yi Qianqian looking for you? Why is Old Shun calling you? Fong Tongtong immediately took her phone back and saw a missed call from Old Shun. Fong Tongtong's heart leaped with joy. She subconsciously lifted the corners of her lips and called back. Seeing this, Mrs. Fong frowned. Do you like this young man? Fong Tongtong was shocked and took a step back. Mom, is that why Qianqian feels that you've wronged her? Mrs. Fong's words were sharp, and Fong Tongtong's heart raced. Fortunately, the call went through quickly, and Shen Julia quickly picked up. Hello, old Shen. Fong Tongtong. Shen Julia's tone was a little harsh. What exactly did you say to Qianqian? Me? I didn't say anything to Qianqian. Even if I want to say something, Qianqian has to believe me. Besides, that's the truth. What else can I say? Fong Tongtong sounded aggrieved. She subconsciously glanced at her mother and mumbled. I just let it slip. That night. Which night? Shen Julia sensed that something was amiss. Who had that night with you? Explain yourself. Chapter 1783. It was that night. Didn't Qianqian run out? Then. Fong Tongtong gave a vague explanation. Mom, don't be here. Mrs. Fong was enraged when she heard that. Yi Qianqian ran out, and then the two of you hooked up? Tell me. Mrs. Fong's voice wasn't soft, and Fong Tongtong was nervous when she heard it. She immediately hung up the phone and said, Mom, there's nothing like that. Don't overthink it. Nothing? Mrs. Fong stared at Fong Tongtong's phone. Why did you hang up the phone if you didn't? You asked this man to tell me. What's the meaning of this? You're two-timing, aren't you? No. Fong Tongtong was about to explain when her phone rang again. When she saw old Shen's name on the screen, Fong Tongtong covered her phone and said, Mom, it's none of your business. Go back to your work. No way. However, Fong Tongtong ran out with her phone in her hand. In a few moments, she was out of sight. Mrs. Fong stomped her feet in anger. Since she couldn't catch up to Yi Qianqian, she turned around and picked up the landline to call Yi Qianqian. After Fong Tongtong confirmed that her mother hadn't caught up to her, she heaved a sigh of relief. She answered the phone. Hello. What did you mean by that? It's about that day. After Yi Qianqian ran out, didn't you go home to bandage up your wound? I went back to Yi Qianqian's house. You didn't come back, and neither did Qianqian. That night, I called someone and accidentally let it slip. I said that the two of you might break up. If you didn't say it first, then Yi Qianqian would. After all, you're a man, and you've been slapped in public. No one can stand it, right? Fong Tongtong, you're the most disgusting and troublesome person I've ever met. Shen Julia was so angry that he didn't bother to hide his anger. What happens between me and Yi Qianqian has nothing to do with you. Today, I'll make things clear with you. Regardless of whether or not Yi Qianqian and I end up together, right now, at this very moment, I really love Yi Qianqian. Even if Yi Qianqian wanted my life right now, I wouldn't have anything to say. As for you, before this incident, I treated you as Yi Qianqian's best friend. Now, I only treat you as a wishful-thinking mistress who only knows how to use underhanded means to destroy other people's relationships. Every word was enunciated clearly. Shen Julia's tone was harsh, but every word was deadly. Fong Tongtong gripped her phone tighter and tighter as she gritted her teeth. However, his eyes had already turned red. She stared at the coarse wall in front of her, and took a deep breath. She opened her mouth to speak, but tears were already flowing from her eyes. Shen Julia, you'll regret this. Fong Tongtong was on the verge of crying out loud. However, she managed to suppress the urge with her rationality. Shen Julia naturally knew how much damage his words would cause to a girl. The guilt in his heart grew. However, if he didn't say those words now, Fong Tongtong wouldn't be the only one who would be hurt in the future. There would be him and Yi Qianqian as well. Shen Julia's gaze deepened as he coldly said, That's not up to you to decide. Yi Qianqian is really unlucky to have a best friend like you. Don't contact Qianqian in the future. I won't send you an invitation when we get married. You're on your own now. Chapter 1784. When she heard the busy tone from the other end of the phone, Fong Tongtong suddenly felt as though all the energy in her body had been sucked out. His grip loosened, and the phone fell to the ground. The ground was made of hard cement. Just by listening to the sound, one could tell that it was a tragic end. Fong Tongtong stared at the ground. She squatted down and picked up her phone. She blinked her eyes hard, and tears immediately formed in her already dry eyes. With reddened eyes, she slowly lowered her head and walked in. Mrs. Fong was on the phone, and it sounded like she was quarreling. What do you mean? Isn't Tong Tong good to you? Now that something like this happened between your boyfriend and her, if it weren't for you, would my daughter have lost her innocence? Now you're trying to shirk responsibility by saying that you don't know? I'm telling you it's impossible. Fong Tong Tong was in a daze when she heard her mother's words. Did she misunderstand something? What innocence? What did she mean by that? Why did it sound like Shenjilia had done something indescribable with her? When Mrs. Fong heard the voice coming from behind her, she immediately turned around and looked at her daughter. She waved at her and said, "To think that you treated her as a good friend. What does Yi Qianqian mean by this? Come here." As Mrs. Fong spoke, she had already turned on the speaker. Fong Tong Tong was silent for a moment before she called out, "Qianqian." Fong Tong Tong. Yi Qianqian sounded a little tired. "Can't you be more shameless? You weren't like this in the past." Yi Qianqian's tone wasn't harsh, but the contempt in it was unbearable. Fong Tong Tong was about to say something, but Yi Qianqian had already hung up. Mrs. Fong was furious when she heard that and roared, "What's the meaning of this? Tong Tong, what does this woman mean?" It wasn't just Mrs. Fong. Fong Tong Tong was also fuming with rage. The faint sense of guilt in his heart had completely vanished. "If you are heartless, I will be unjust. Since you guys are going to break up, why don't you break up completely?" Yi Qianqian felt that the events of the past few days had tormented her unbearably. The most disgusting thing was that she even felt disgusted by her own home. That night, if the two of them really had that night, it must have been in her little nest. However, he didn't know which bed it was. How disgusting. Yi Qianqian muttered and closed her eyes tightly. Just then his phone rang. It was Shenjilia. Yi Qianqian only glanced at it before turning the phone to silent mode and putting it aside. Yi Yuyu had just come downstairs when she saw Yi Qianqian's extremely troubled expression. She sat down beside her. Yi Qianqian glanced at Yi Yuyu before her eyes landed on her stomach. Time really flies. Did you blow air into your stomach? How did it get bigger so quickly? Go, it's a real baby inside. Feel it. Yi Yuyu grabbed her hand and gently stroked her belly. The child isn't big now. In a little more than a month, it should start moving. So fast. Yes, the child can be born after more than 9 months of pregnancy. At that time, don't let her see Aunt's sad face. When she heard that, the corners of her mouth twitched and she replied, "I've just fallen out of love. Can't you forgive me a little?" Chapter 1785. As far as he could remember, Yi Qianqian was always noisy and cheerful. She had always been optimistic. Yi Yi rarely saw Yi Qianqian so troubled. Yi Qianqian shook her head without hesitation. "No. I don't want to see him." "Why? If there's something, it's better to talk it out. The most important thing for a husband and wife is to be honest. No matter what kind of misunderstanding you have, it'll be fine as long as you talk it out." Yi Yuyu said softly as she caressed her stomach. Yi Qianqian looked at Yi Yuyu and felt a little envious. Yi Yuyu was a woman who was as gentle as water. She spoke softly, was meticulous, understanding, and patient. Any man would like a woman like Yi Yuyu, right? As for his temper, it was really terrible. Thinking of that, Yi Qianqian felt even worse. She said, "Yi, we're not married. We're not husband and wife. We just broke up. You like him very much. You can lie to me about that, but you can't lie to yourself." Yi Yuyu held her hand. "I always thought that it was only a matter of time before the two of you got married. No, Yi Yuyu, you don't know him at all." "Do you know Fong Tong Tong?" "Of course I know her. She was my bridesmaid at my wedding." "What about it?" Yi Yuyu looked at Yi Qianqian. "She's been staying at your place for the past few days, right? Does this matter have anything to do with her? Do you think I really like Shenjilia Yuyu?" Yi Yuyu didn't know why Yi Qianqian suddenly changed the topic. After thinking about it, she said, "Well, perhaps it's already beyond liking. You love him very much, sister." "Is that so? I thought so a few days ago, but I don't think so anymore." "Ah, if you love someone, Shouldn't you tolerate everything about them? In the past, I thought I loved Fong Tongtong. Later, I thought I loved Shinjilia, but when I found out that the two of them had sex, I didn't love anyone anymore. Yi Yu didn't expect to hear that. She couldn't help but widen her eyes and gasp. No way, the two of them had sex? Yi Qianqian had expected such a reaction from Yi Yu. She laughed bitterly and said, "It's unbelievable, isn't it? I think so too. That's impossible. If Shinjilia really got together with Fong Tongtong, based on my understanding of him, he would definitely break up with you. It's impossible for him to keep calling you and begging you to change your mind like he is doing now." Fong Tongtong said it was an accident. Yi Yu was speechless. Indeed, if Shinjilia had fallen in love with someone else, he would have broken up with Yi Qianqian. However, if it was just an accident, and the person Shinjilia liked and loved was still Yi Qianqian, then it was understandable that things would turn out like this. This is outrageous. Yi Yu was infuriated. To think that you treated them so well. Is this how they repay you? Yi Qianqian was already in a terrible mood. When she heard that, she felt the urge to cry. "I'll call him and ask." She picked up the phone and dialed Shinjilia's number. Yi Qianqian laughed bitterly. "Do you think it's possible for him to admit it?" "Yes, it's impossible." Yi Yu frowned and said, "Perhaps it's a misunderstanding." Chapter 1786. You believe what Fong Tongtong says? Yi Yu was exasperated. What if she just wants you to break up? What if she's up to no good? What if she's already taken a liking to Shinjilia and wants to poach you and become your mistress? It wasn't that Yi Qianqian hadn't considered these questions before. Meeting Yi Yu's gaze, Yi Qianqian said, "Fong Tongtong has never had a boyfriend. How could she blabber about something like that? Shinjilia is my boyfriend. Everyone knows that. If she's really trying to ruin our relationship, how bad would her reputation be if word got out? But I don't think it's possible. Shinjilia isn't stupid. Since he loves you, he wouldn't be entangled with another woman." Yi Yu defended Shinjilia. "I've known Shinjilia for almost 20 years. I think I have some understanding of him. But he lied to me." Yi Qianqian's eyes reddened as she revealed the truth. From the time Shinjilia hid his injury from her to the time she exposed his lie, to the time Fong Tongtong let slip, Yi Yu explained everything clearly, no matter how big or small it was. The details were very detailed. Yi Yu was so stunned by what she heard that she had nothing to say. There were suspicious points everywhere. There were loopholes everywhere. With so many things Shinjilia had done, it was difficult to convince others that he was innocent. Yi Yu remained silent. When she saw Yi Qianqian's reddened eyes, she said, "I think we should give him a chance to explain himself." "There's no need." Yi Qianqian interrupted her. "Fortunately, we're not married yet. If we break up now, we might as well. Who knows, this might be a good start." Yi Yu was indignant. "You're just going to let it go like that? What else can I do?" "Of course not. Which man doesn't have a few ex-girlfriends outside? Can't you just treat it as if he's had an ex-girlfriend before?" "But Fong Tongtong is my best friend since I was young. She's a good friend of mine. Even a rabbit doesn't eat the grass near its nest. What does this mean? Furthermore, Fong Tongtong's mother called me just now. She scolded me for ruining her daughter and bringing her to the front of a beast. Yi Qianqian almost burst into tears. She almost couldn't hold it in. Yi Yu panicked and quickly pulled her into her arms. "Don't cry. Don't cry." Yi Qianqian wasn't the kind of person who would cry at the drop of a hat. She wiped her eyes and sniffled before saying, "If Fong Tongtong's mother finds out about this, it's equivalent to the entire town knowing about it. You know how the mouths of women in small towns can be. Dad is an electrician. Everyone in the town knows him. Plus, the news of your grand marriage has probably spread all over the world. Now that something like this has happened, I'm really afraid that if I go back to the town, I'll be criticized by the people in the town." "Aya." You hit her. "You're the mistress. You're the victim. Why are you acting as though you owe them something? Don't let me down. Yu, what will I do in the future?" Chapter 1787. There will be retribution. Those words kept echoing in Yi Qianqian's mind. After dinner, Yi Qianqian slept at Yi Yuyu's side. Yi Qianqian was Yi Yuyu's biological sister, so she didn't shy away and stayed in the guest room. Although Li Jinnan was busy with work, he often went home. When he saw Yi Qianqian, he would say a few words to her from a distance. However, he was her sister's husband. When Yi Qianqian thought of Feng Tongtong, she didn't dare to get close to Li Jinnan. Days like that passed for 3 days in a row. For the past few days, Yi Qianqian went to the office at 7 in the morning and got off work at 9 in the evening. She specially instructed the receptionist to tell Shinjilia that she had applied for leave or resigned if he came looking for her. The chief editor was very pleased and even praised Yi Qianqian during the meeting. She was given the title of Best Employee and wasn't deducted from the full attendance award. In just a few days, everyone knew that Yi Qianqian had fallen out of love. The originally lazy performance queen suddenly became a hard-working person who went out early and came back late. It was precisely because of this that Yi Qianqian's performance had achieved results that amazed everyone in just a few days at the end of the month. 3 days was neither a long nor short time. Yi Qianqian didn't dare to stop. She was busy every day, afraid that if she stopped, she would think of Shinjilia, Feng Tongtong, and their affair. As for herself, she could only stay at her sister's house and seek comfort. However, she didn't expect that even though Yi Qianqian avoided Shinjilia so much, she would still be stopped at the entrance of the office. It was already 10 o'clock when she got off work. Yi Qianqian carried her bag and walked downstairs. She was about to hail a cab when she suddenly felt a grip on her arm. Yi Qianqian jumped in fright. She screamed and jumped back. "It's me." Shinjilia's voice rang out, and Yi Qianqian calmed down. However, her heart felt as if it was being pricked by needles. They hadn't seen each other for a few days, but Shinjilia looked very tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his cheeks were a little thin. Yi Qianqian glanced at her hand that was being held and frowned in resistance. She twisted it and said in disgust, "What do you want?" "I just want to tell you that I'm moving away. I won't bother you anymore." Shinjilia loosened his grip. "I've finished moving everything. I've also added a fish tank. Haven't you always wanted a fish tank? I've reared your favorite tropical fish in it. You can go back and stay there for the rest of the day." Yi Qianqian felt as if her chest had been hammered by a hammer. Yi Qianqian felt a little suffocated. "That's your house. It's your home. I'm just lodging here. Don't mess up your priorities." Shinjilia smiled. "In the future, take good care of yourself." Yi Qianqian pursed her lips tightly, and her eyes suddenly became hot. She lowered her head, not daring to look at him. "But Qianqian, I've never done anything to let you down. I've done it before, I'm doing it now, and I'll be doing it in the future." Shinjilia gazed deeply into her eyes. "I'll wait for you to come back." Yi Qianqian gripped the strap of her bag tighter and tighter. That was what she wanted, wasn't it? But why did she feel so sad when Shinjilia said those words? Hadn't she been hiding and running away for so long because she was afraid that he would pester her? Now that he had decided to move away, she felt empty in her heart. Chapter 1788. It had only been a few days since he last saw her, but Shinjilia could clearly feel that she had lost a lot of weight. Her complexion wasn't very good either. Her petite and exquisite body seemed even more frail than before. It was autumn, and it was getting colder. Yi Qianqian was wearing a beige sleeveless short skirt that he had never seen before. It looked very thin. In the past, Shinjilia would have carried her over and scolded her while warming her up. Then he would have carried her home and tucked her into bed. But he couldn't do that anymore. Shinjilia stretched out his hand, but in the end he didn't reach it. Yi Qianqian forced herself to calm down. She looked up and forced a smile. "Thank you. Goodbye." She turned around, and suddenly, a cold wind blew over. It made Yi Qianqian's body tremble. Shinjilia's throat became more and more uncomfortable. His heart felt like it was being squeezed by a hand. He wanted to go forward, but his rationality stopped him. In the end, he couldn't help but call out, "Qianqian." Yi Qianqian stopped in her tracks and straightened her body. She didn't look back and forced herself to be calm. What's the matter? I really love you. Shinjulia's voice was a little low. Yi Qianqian's ears felt the cold wind, but his faint words fell clearly into her ears. A cold arrow pierced through the heart. It was fatal and chilling. Yi Qianqian straightened her back and strode forward. A taxi came from the opposite direction. Yi Qianqian stopped it and got in. She didn't dare to look back at him again. Some people and some things once left behind would be inextricably entangled in a frenzy. So be it. Once was enough for a bloody betrayal. When she returned home, Yi Qianqian opened the door and saw a beautiful bathtub. It was rectangular and lit with beautiful incandescent lights. There were tropical fish the size of 2 fingers swimming in it. The green kelp slowly floated with the waves, and the dark red coral opened and closed. It was beautiful. Everything was how she had imagined it to be. But her heart felt as if it had been stabbed several times. Tears flowed uncontrollably. I really love you. *CK your true love. I don't care. Yi Qianqian squatted down, curled up on the ground, and burst into tears. She didn't know how much time had passed before she finally got up. She wiped away her tears, took a shower, and lay down on the bed. Go to sleep. When he woke up, tomorrow was a new day. In the morning, Yi Qianqian was woken up by a phone call. It was the landline at home. Yi Qianqian got up and lazily picked up the phone in her slippers. Hello. Qianqian, are you awake? It was Yi Zhenhua. I just woke up. Today is the weekend, so I plan to sleep a little longer. Oh, by the way, do you know about Fang Tongtong's return to Yuntown? When she heard Fang Tongtong's name, Yi Qianqian's drowsiness disappeared. She focused her gaze and calmly replied, Yeah. I heard that you broke up with Shen. How did you know? Looks like it's true. Yi Zhenhua sighed. I didn't expect little Shen to be such an honest person. I didn't expect him to be such a person behind the scenes. No matter what, Tong Tong is your friend. Great, now she's even your friend. Yi Qianqian was silent. After a while she asked, Dad, what do you know? What do I know? It's almost spread throughout the town. They're saying that your boyfriend raped Fang Tongtong and ruined her chastity. How could he do such a thing? Yi Qianqian widened her eyes when she heard that. Wan Lily. Your man cheated. What are you going to do? Chapter 1789. What do I know? It's almost spread throughout the town. They're saying that your boyfriend raped Fang Tongtong and ruined her chastity. How could he do such a thing? Yi Qianqian's eyes widened when she heard that. What? Yi Qianqian couldn't believe it. Old Shen raped Fang Tongtong? Uft. How is that possible? Yi Zhenhua clapped his hands when he heard that. That's right. How is that possible? Shen is a very upright person. How could he do such a thing? Exactly. Yi Qianqian held her forehead. She was both angry and amused. At the same time, she was filled with anger. Who said that? *CK. Today, I finally know what it means to spread falsehoods. Not only that, but they also said that you're a bad person. They said that you brought Fang Tongtong into the tiger's den, causing her to lose her chastity and chastity. You even stirred up a lot of unhappiness. Now she's staying at home. Her mother talks to everyone she sees. She scolds you very harshly. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I argued with her once. Yi Zhenhua's voice grew angrier as he spoke. How can there be such a person in this world? I used to think that their family was pretty good, but now it's like this. Why doesn't she say that her daughter seduced my future son-in-law? It takes 2 hands to clap. If Fang Tongtong wasn't willing to be with him, Shen wouldn't have been able to do anything to her. Yi Qianqian laughed bitterly when she heard that. Yi Zhenhua sighed. Qianqian, no matter what, you can't be with him anymore after what happened. This kind of man is fickle. Today it's Tongtong, but tomorrow it might be someone else. It's better to break up. Dad, I know what I'm doing. It's just a pity. Shen is a good kid. He's good-looking, hard-working, eloquent and well-educated. I don't believe that Shen would do something like this. Yi Qianqian was silent. I think it's unbelievable too. Hey, if you don't have anything going on this weekend, go home. Your grandfather isn't in good health. Recently he's been on M4 drip. I didn't tell you because you're busy with work. Yi Zhenhua's voice was slow and gentle. Grandfather might be here in the next 2 days. Come back to see him. He misses you very much. Yi Qianqian's eyes reddened and she nodded. Yeah. Ever since Grandma passed away, Grandpa's health had not been very good. 2 years of dementia had been torturous. Yi Qianqian was already aware of the old man's condition. However, if he were to return at this critical juncture, it would be hard to avoid some gossip. After some thought, Yi Qianqian gave Yi Yuyu a call. Over the past few days, Feng Tongtong had become the talk of the town. In the past, the people that the townspeople talked about the most were those with bright futures. This was the first time that everyone was talking about him. Feng Tongtong felt that she was extremely shameless. She had used her mother's mouth to vilify Yi Qianqian for the past few days. By now, almost everyone in town knew that Yi Qianqian had betrayed her friend for the sake of glory. In order to break up, she had pushed Yi Qianqian to Shenjilia and then dumped her man. It was also the first time Feng Tongtong realized how terrifying the term spreading rumors could be. Verbal violence was far more unbearable than a direct physical attack. Chapter 1790. When Feng Tongtong heard her mother's words, she was stunned. She looked at her mother in disbelief and asked, "Why did she come back? Isn't she waiting to be criticized for coming back at this time?" At the same time, Feng Tongtong thought of another possibility. Could it be that Yi Qianqian came back to settle scores with me? **T. Anger flashed across Lady Feng's face as she said, "She even wants to settle accounts with you. You should be thankful that I didn't settle accounts with her. If she hadn't taken you to her house to live, would such a thing have happened? That girl is really despicable." Feng Tongtong felt a little embarrassed. You clearly knew that wasn't the case. Now that you've said that, everyone is talking about us. If that's the case, won't everyone think that I've been fooled? Are you still my mom? Feng Tongtong felt a little embarrassed. What do you know? Mrs. Feng reached out and pointed a finger at Feng Tongtong's head. She sounded a little exasperated at Feng Tongtong's failure to live up to her expectations. If I didn't say that, would this matter have blown up? Don't you like that guy? If this matter didn't blow up, would you still be with him? Would he have broken up with Yi Qianqian? But even if you blew things up to this point, my reputation will still be in tatters. The more Feng Tongtong thought about it, the more aggrieved she felt. She scolded. Why do I have a mother like you? Do you know that people are pointing fingers at me the moment I step out of the house? Even if this matter wasn't true, it has become true. Silly girl, Mom is doing this for your own good. Did Yi Qianqian break up with that man? Feng Tongtong nodded her head. Her eyes were slightly red. That's right. Call that man and ask him. Now that everyone knows about the two of you, see what he wants to do. When Feng Tongtong heard that, she pursed her lips. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she still nodded her head. It was early autumn. It was drizzling, and the wind was strong. It made people feel tired and bleak. It was rare for Yi Qianqian to come home and see so many people in the yard. It was very lively. Yi Yuyu and Li Jinnan followed behind Yi Qianqian. They walked in quietly, leaning against each other. The people who came and went were all relatives she hadn't seen in a long time. When they saw Yi Qianqian, some of them whispered to each other, while others merely nodded and smiled before walking past her. Yi Qianqian knew that the only reason they were paying attention to her was because of the recent rumors. Moreover, it was a rumor that was bad for him. Yi Qianqian turned a blind eye to it. She walked straight into her grandfather's room. His father was looking at his grandfather. The old man was lying on the bed. His hair was snow-white, and his eyes were deeply sunken. He looked a little scary, but his eyes were still kind. When he saw Yi Qianqian come in, he called out in a hoarse voice, "Qianqian." Yi Qianqian's eyes reddened. She stepped forward and took the old man's withered hand from Yi Zhenhua's and called out, "Grandpa." Yi Yu followed behind and walked forward as well. She didn't have any feelings for this old man, but at this time, she still felt a little sad. When the old man saw Yu Yu, he tried his best to smile and called out, "Yu Yu." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Grandpa still remembers me." Chapter 1791. Li Jinnan walked forward and looked at the old man as he gently squatted down. "Grandpa, I'm Xiaonan. I'm Yu Yu's husband, your grandson-in-law. Don't worry. I'll treat Dad and Yu Yu well." It was simple, but sincere and powerful. He didn't know how to speak the dialect of Yin Town, and he didn't know if Yi Zhenhua could understand him, but every word he said was sincere. Yi Zhenhua translated for Grandpa. Grandpa nodded his head with a smile. The old man looked very spirited. His cloudy eyes reflected the vicissitudes of life and experience that were different from those of an ordinary person. He looked at Yi Qianqian and patted her hand as he said, "Qianqian, you're a sensible child. Don't care what outsiders say. You're my good granddaughter." Yi Qianqian was stunned when she heard that. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer. "Grandpa. Grandpa is most worried about you. You're an impulsive child who refuses to submit to others, and your mouth is unforgiving. There are many things in this world that we mortals can't predict. You have to learn to avoid them. You're a good child, but your personality is just like your father's. You can't be like this, you have to change in the future, understand?" Yi Qianqian nodded her head. "I understand, Grandpa." At the same time, she felt that it was a little strange. Grandpa's dementia over the years had made it difficult for him to recognize people. He was even a little muddle-headed. However, it was rare to see someone so spirited and articulate like this. "Zhenhua." Grandpa's voice was still very spirited. He looked at Yi Zhenhua and said, "I've lived for so long, and the person I'm most worried about is Qianqian. It's my regret that I didn't get to see her get married. Zhenhua, you must marry her off in style." "Dad, don't worry. All right, your mother is waiting for me. I'll make a move first." When the old man said that, he looked at the top of the bed with a smile on his face. "Don't cry after I leave. I'm with your grandmother again." When those words were said, it made them want to cry even more. At the same time, they couldn't help but look up at the top of the bed. There was nothing up there. But the old man's eyes were filled with extreme affection. Soon the old man closed his eyes. He left. The old man had lived a peaceful life. He was upright and friendly. He loved his wife dearly, even more so. Now the old couple could finally reunite. However, the room was filled with cries of grief. The news of the old man's death spread very quickly in town. Yi Qianqian's grandfather was very prestigious in town. Coupled with Yi Zhenhua's fame, it didn't take long for the news to spread. There was a big banyan tree at the most densely populated part of the town. There was a small shop under the big banyan tree. When Fang Tongtong heard the passers-by talking about it, she was amazed. Before Yi Qianqian returned, there had been no news of the old man. Yi Qianqian had just returned when she heard someone mention that old Master Shen had left. Was old Master Shen specifically waiting for Yi Qianqian? At this moment, Mrs. Fang rushed back from outside. After she entered, she told Fang Tongtong, "You'll look for Yi Qianqian later." Fang Tongtong was baffled and asked, "Why would I look for her?" Chapter 1792. Fang Tongtong was silent. Her biological grandfather had passed away. She must be sad. Fang Tongtong had a good impression of the old man. He was always smiling and looked amiable. When she heard what her mother said, Fang Tongtong glanced at her. "Let's wait for a while. They must be very busy right now. They don't have time for me. Let's go tomorrow." "Sounds good." Mrs. Fang nodded. "Sure. You can give them some money. Do you have it?" "Yeah, I know what I'm doing." It wasn't the first time the family had a funeral. When her grandmother passed away, Yi Qianqian had experienced the same hardships. The elders and relatives all came to pay their respects, and they all looked at her with prejudice. Yi Qianqian pretended not to see them and remained silent. After half a day of work, it was already noon. The weather was still very hot. Her grandfather's body was frozen in the crystal coffin. Under such high temperatures, it wouldn't cool down too quickly. In just one day and one night, Yi Qianqian had the illusion that the door was about to be trampled by people. Tong Tong, what are you doing here? Someone shouted. Yi Qianqian's back stiffened. As expected, when she turned her head, she saw Fong Tongtong walking in. Fong Tongtong's face was expressionless. She looked at Yi Qianqian and smiled. Qianqian, I'm here to see you. Yi Qianqian felt a little sarcastic. See me? See how I'm doing after my relationship with my boyfriend was ruined? At the same time, the people around them also looked over. There was bound to be a lot of people coming and going when the family held a funeral. Yi Qianqian glanced at them and nodded her head, pretending to be calm. Thank you. Is there anything I can help you with? No. If you really want to help me tidy up the inside. There are too many things, and many people have used them. I don't have time to tidy up now. Fong Tongtong felt like she was being ordered around, but she didn't show it on her face. She nodded her head and turned around to do what she was told. Many people whispered to each other when they saw the scene. Most of them were gloating. In this world, there was no lack of people watching the show. Yi Qianqian knew that and didn't want to bother with her. Very busy. Yi Qianqian didn't know what she was busy with. She didn't know whether it was entertaining guests or other miscellaneous matters. She found it very troublesome. Qianqian. Fong Tongtong walked over to Yi Qianqian. The room had blocked off all sounds from the outside world. What's the matter? Yi Qianqian sat lazily on the stool, not even looking at her. I want to apologize to you. I didn't know that the rumors outside would spread like this. You know, these words can't be said by me. It's just a rumor. How could such an exaggerated thing be possible? Yi Qianqian glanced at her lazily and sneered. I know it's just a rumor. Old Shun isn't blind. How could he possibly like you? When Fong Tongtong heard that, she looked at Yi Qianqian and gritted her teeth. Yi Qianqian, don't go overboard. I know what kind of person you are, and you know what kind of person I am. I'm only apologizing to you because I feel sorry for you. You have such a foul mouth. Pfft. Yi Qianqian burst out laughing. You're such a smooth talker. Are you with Shinjulia? Chapter 1793. Since you insist on doing this, I won't say anything else. The truth and the lie were separated by a single thought. Yi Qianqian would never know that she was so close to finding out the truth of the matter. Fong Tongtong turned around and clenched her fists without looking back. She quickly walked out. Yi Qianqian looked at Fong Tongtong's back and found it ridiculous. Fong Tongtong. Fong Tongtong stopped in her tracks and turned around to look at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian's eyes were cold. You'll get your comeuppance. Fong Tongtong was dismissive. Thank you for your kind words. Fong Tongtong felt upset when she left Yi Qianqian's house. I'll get my comeuppance? I'm not the only one at fault in this matter. If Yi Qianqian hadn't trusted Shinjulia enough, I wouldn't have had the chance to take advantage of the situation. Most importantly, I didn't succeed in entering the relationship. Yi Qianqian was so convinced. This could only mean that their love couldn't stand the test of time. Who was to blame? From another perspective, Yi Qianqian and Shinjulia had to thank Fong Tongtong. They thought that they could talk about marriage, but in reality, it couldn't stand the slightest bit of wind and rain. It was good that they broke up. At least they didn't have to stay together and torture each other. Fong Tongtong was furious. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that she was right. From Fong Tongtong's house to Yi Qianqian's house, they had to pass through a small forest. The small forest was a forest that was heavily cultivated in town. The plants that were cultivated there were very precious. Fong Tongtong was afraid that people would think that she was there to steal wood every time she passed by. However, this path was a shortcut. Although it was a little remote, it still saved her a lot of time. It was raining that day, so the surroundings were wet. A gust of wind blew, and the surrounding small trees rustled. Fong Tongtong shivered from the wind. She felt like she was freezing. Suddenly, a strange sound came from behind. Fong Tongtong suddenly felt a little creeped out. She had just returned from Yi Qianqian's house. There was a dead person in her house. You'll get your comeuppance. Yi Qianqian's sinister voice seemed to ring beside her ear. Fong Tongtong felt uncomfortable all over. Don't tell me he's already here? Fong Tongtong hugged her arm and was about to make a run for it when a huge force suddenly came from behind and pulled her back. Fong Tongtong's eyes widened. At the same time she shrieked, "Ah!" Before her voice could travel far, Fong Tongtong's mouth was covered. Fong Tongtong's entire body was restrained by a huge force that came out of nowhere. Her body was suspended in the air, and Fong Tongtong did not feel the slightest sense of security. She struggled with all her might, but the force seemed to have locked onto her and did not loosen at all. Then he was thrown to the ground. It didn't take long for Fong Tongtong to be drenched in mud. Before Fong Tongtong could react, she caught a glimpse of a dark shadow pressing down on her. "Help! Ah!" Fong Tongtong struggled with all her might, but her mouth was covered by his hand. She couldn't put up a fight. "Wifey, I've been looking for you for a long time. Why did you run away with someone else? I love you, I really love you. Don't go with anyone else. Come back with me." "Ha!" A middle-aged man's voice rang in her ears. Chapter 1794. "Qianqian, where's your sister?" Yi Zhenhua's voice could be heard. It sounded a little anxious. Yi Qianqian was sleeping soundly inside. She hadn't slept for long before she was woken up. She squinted her eyes and frowned as she got up. She stretched and yawned before saying, "She's with her husband. They should be out for a walk at this hour." "Nonsense. Ainen is helping out outside. Where did your sister go?" Yi Qianqian walked out listlessly. Feeling a little tired, she called out, "What's wrong? Can't you just call and ask?" "Someone outside is saying that a young girl was bullied by a crazy man. Oh, look for her." Yi Zhenhua's tone was nervous. He hurried to find his cell phone. Just as he was about to make the call, Yi Yu's voice came from behind. "What's wrong?" Yi Yu walked over. Her belly was slightly bulging. She looked very pregnant. Li Jinan was right behind Yi Yu. Although he couldn't understand what they were saying, he could tell that Yi Zhenhua was very nervous. He asked, "Dad, were you looking for us?" Yi Zhenhua saw that Yi Yu was there and breathed a sigh of relief. He said, "It's good that you're here. It's good that you're here. You scared me to death. I knew it couldn't be your daughter. I know your daughter. That girl isn't as tall as your daughter, so I didn't see her face. But she was crying so miserably." Third granduncle Yi came over. He seemed to be in good spirits, but his small eyes were burning with the flame of gossip, which made people feel like laughing. Yi Qianqian pursed her lips and asked, "Were you scared by the crazy man? If she could be mistaken with us, she should be very old. How could she be so useless? How could she be scared like this?" When third Uncle Yi heard that, he looked at her with a "you're too naive" expression and said, "Who told you that she was scared? She was bullied." As he spoke, he seemed to feel a little ashamed. He whispered, "In the woods on that forest path. She was dragged in. Don't you think she was crying?" Yi Yu opened her eyes and asked in Mandarin, "Could she have been?" Third great-uncle turned his head away with an unbearable expression and waved his hand. "This girl is really a little unlucky. Of all people, she just had to run into that lunatic." "Lunatic?" Yi Qianqian's curiosity was piqued. "Who's the lunatic?" "There was a young man called Wang Jincheng. He was about the same age as you. Do you remember him?" "Oh, that's him. The one who moved here from the neighboring town. He's my classmate. What's wrong?" "It's that father of hers. His brain was broken by someone, and he would recognize anyone as his wife. I'm afraid this girl is ruined." Yi Qianqian was shocked. "His father? Isn't that older than my father?" "Almost, but alas, his mind is not clear." Third uncle waved his hand and said sympathetically, "How pitiful. It's all fate. If you're unlucky, you can't blame anyone else." Li Jinan didn't feel any regret. After all, it had nothing to do with him. Yi Qianqian clicked her tongue and shook her head. "How tragic." Yi Yu looked at him curiously and asked, "You can understand it?" "A little." Li Jinan hugged her. "After being married for so long, it's not for nothing." "Oh, that's enough. Stop showing off your love." Yi Qianqian waved her hand. I'll go help. Chapter 1795. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she stopped in her tracks and looked over. That person was an auntie who lived next door. She was a nice person, but she was very gossipy. Yi Qianqian didn't have any special feelings for this auntie, but she still had to address her as auntie. Did something happen to Fang Tongtong? Ever since Yi Qianqian was young, Fang Tongtong was the only friend she had in this town that was known to the others. Although they weren't on good terms now, they still had many years of friendship. The auntie looked at Yi Qianqian with an anxious and regretful expression on her face. She said, Yes, go and have a look. We've already sent her to the hospital. Yi Qianqian was shocked. What? How did this happen? The unfortunate girl they had been gossiping about for so long was actually Fang Tongtong? Fang Tongtong was bullied by a crazy man? How could that be possible? Hey, of all the places this woman could have gone, she just had to take that small path. Usually no one would go there, but when she walked there today, she was bullied by that crazy B*****. She kept bleeding down there, and there were almost a few bowls of blood. As he spoke, he waved his fists in front of her. His expression was exaggerated, and he looked very serious as he gestured. Everyone who saw it was trembling with fear. Yi exclaimed. Why would there be so much blood when it's normal? Could it be? Yi Qianqian's heart also skipped a beat. Could it be that she had a miscarriage? It had only been 10 days since Fang Tongtong and Xinjilia got to know each other. Could it be that she was pregnant just like that? No, that wasn't right. How could a normal pregnancy happen so quickly? Yi Qianqian felt that there was definitely something wrong. Her brows knitted together tightly. There's still a funeral at home. Don't run around. Yi Zhenhua frowned and tugged at her. He said, Isn't your relationship with her bad? Don't go. Her mother is unreasonable. She might even think that you're going to see her make a fool of herself. I'll go take a look. I'll be back soon. Yi Qianqian flung Yi Zhenhua's hand away. She went into the house to grab her bag and walked out. Dad, lend me your donkey. Don't go. Don't get yourself into trouble. Yi Zhenhua disagreed. Yi Qianqian went straight into the living room to retrieve the car keys and dashed out. Miscarriage? The possibility of a miscarriage in half a month of pregnancy was not impossible, but when did they start to lose so much blood at this time? Could it be that, when they first met, they already had an affair? No, that's impossible. Impossible. Yi Qianqian headed in the direction of the hospital. It was quite a distance from her house to the hospital in town. It would take about 17 minutes to get there with the battery-powered car. After parking the car, Yi Qianqian hurried over. After asking around, Yi Qianqian finally arrived at the gynecology department on the 9th floor. Fang Tongtong's mother was wiping away her tears in the hallway. Yi Qianqian saw sadness and despair on her face. At the same time, Mrs. Fang seemed to see Yi Qianqian as well. Anger flashed across her face. Just as she was about to speak, the door to the operating theater opened. Doctor, how is it? Are you her mother? Yes. Chapter 1796. Yi Qianqian heard this from outside and called out, Auntie. When Mrs. Fang heard this, she turned around and said angrily, What are you doing here? I heard that something happened to Tongtong. Yi Qianqian had run all the way here, so she was panting as she spoke. I heard from the aunt next door that she lost a lot of blood. I'm a little worried. Mrs. Fang had watched Yi Qianqian grow up, so she naturally knew what kind of person she was. When she heard this, her expression softened a little. Yi Qianqian stepped forward and said, How is she now? I'll come with you. When Mrs. Fang heard this, she gritted her teeth but didn't say anything. Yi Qianqian followed them in. The doctor said, Her hymen was torn and the walls of her vagina were injured. It's not a big problem, but she's crying very hard. As her parent, you have to comfort her. What? Mrs. Fang couldn't believe it. Her hymen was torn? How is that possible? Wasn't she already? When the doctor said this, Mrs. Fang was not the only one who was shocked. Even Yi Qianqian was shocked. How is that possible? On the way here, she had already mentally prepared herself for Fang Tongtong to have a miscarriage. Although she was disappointed, at least Fang Tongtong had received her retribution. Logically speaking, she should come over to take a look and confirm it. But she never expected this to be the result. Fang Tongtong's hymen was torn today. In other words, nothing happened between Shenjilie and Fang Tongtong? Oh my god. Yi Qianqian held her face, and she didn't know what to feel. She had always believed in Fang Tongtong's words. She thought that Shenjilie was lying to her. After all, she grew up with Fang Tongtong. No matter what, Fang Tongtong wouldn't do such a thing. She had never suspected Fang Tongtong. Although she resented her, she didn't doubt her at all. But she didn't expect the truth to be like this. Mrs. Fang was in disbelief, and at the same time she broke down. She grabbed the doctor's arm and said in disbelief, "How is that possible? Could there be a mistake?" The doctor was a little sympathetic. She removed Mrs. Fang's hand and said, "I sympathize with your daughter's experience, but this kind of thing is what it is. This kind of criminal should be arrested by the police. I will give you a medical certificate, and you can do it when the time comes." With that, the female doctor patted Mrs. Fang on the shoulder and left. Mrs. Fang seemed to be unable to bear it, and her whole body softly collapsed. Yi Qianqian found it hard to believe, but she was still rational. She quickly supported Mrs. Fang and shouted, "Auntie, auntie." Mrs. Fang's eyes were already red to begin with, and now, tears directly flowed down her cheeks. She thumped her chest and shouted, "What kind of sin did I commit? What have I done?" Yi Qianqian felt as if her heart had been violently shaken. She looked at Mrs. Fang and felt a little upset. "Qianqian, oh Qianqian." Mrs. Fang looked at Yi Qianqian with a complicated look in her eyes. But in the end he still turned around and sighed heavily. Fang Tongtong had already fallen into a deep sleep. Everything that happened that day was probably a heavy blow to her. Yi Qianqian looked at Fang Tongtong's eyes, which were red and swollen from crying. Her heart ached. Chapter 1797. Mrs. Fang touched her daughter's forehead as tears streamed down her cheeks. Yi Qianqian didn't know how long she stood there, but she didn't wait for Fang Tongtong to wake up. She left on her own. When she reached the bottom of the hospital, Yi Qianqian suddenly felt that she had been too arbitrary and impulsive. There was no doubt that the truth was right in front of them. There was nothing between Shenjilie and Fang Tongtong. She was the one who didn't trust Shenjilie. She ran her fingers through her hair. All she could think about was what Shenjilie had said that night. "Qianqian, I've never done anything to let you down. It's the same in the past, the same now, and the same in the future. Qianqian, I really love you." Shenjilie's cold and deep voice seemed to ring in her ears. It was soft and sorrowful. She could almost imagine Shenjilie's despair. This kind of despair seemed to flow from Shenjilie to herself. The sky was misty and somewhat dark and gloomy. An overwhelming sadness engulfed him, and he couldn't stop it. Yi Qianqian felt a lump in her throat as she walked in the direction of her car. "Shenjilie, I'm sorry. Grandpa's funeral was held for a few days, and everything was handled by the elders." Even so, Yi Qianqian was still overwhelmed with work. By the time he finished dealing with the matter, a week had already passed. Li Jinnan brought his wife and sister-in-law back to Kingstown. He dropped Yi Qianqian off at the entrance of the neighborhood and drove home. However, Yi Qianqian had no intention of going upstairs. Instead, he picked up the phone, opened the dial page, and pressed the familiar string of numbers. The person on the other side of the phone seemed to be busy. No one picked up after 2 consecutive calls. Forget it. Just as Yi Qianqian was about to hang up, the call was suddenly picked up. "Hello." It was a gentle female voice. It sounded like he was younger than her. Yi Qianqian froze when she heard the voice. The woman on the other end didn't hear a reply, so she asked, "Who are you looking for?" Yi Qianqian didn't say anything. She hung up the phone without thinking. It was only after the call ended that Yi Qianqian realized that her heart was racing like thunder. It was like being a thief. She took a look and confirmed that it was indeed Shenjilie's number. If she remembered correctly, Shinjulia had previously left a note for her on his phone as future wife, with a small heart at the end. However, it was obvious that the girl did not know who Yi Qianqian was. Either Shinjulia had changed the contact number, or Shinjulia had deleted her phone number. At that thought, Yi Qianqian's heart was in turmoil. It was unbearable. But very quickly, he laughed at himself. Serves you right. Who said that Shinjulia could only have her? Who said that she could break up with him, but he couldn't find someone else? It was just that his heart felt so uncomfortable. He went upstairs in a daze. As soon as he entered, he saw the small fish tank inside. The little fish were still swimming around energetically, their tails swinging left and right, and the seaweed was bobbing up and down. She's so strong. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but sigh. She looked at the colorful, beautiful, and eye-catching little fish. They were all things she liked. But it seemed like they could live well without her. Chapter 1798. Yi Qianqian poured some fish food for the little fish. The fish immediately jumped up and snatched up the fish food in no time. It was said that fish only had a memory of 7 seconds. After 7 seconds, he would completely forget everything he had done. Therefore, in the world of fish, it was normal for them to die from overeating. Yi Qianqian didn't pour any more food. Instead, she got up and took a shower. Yi Qianqian didn't sleep the whole night. She tossed and turned in bed. Her mind was filled with thoughts about who the person who had just answered the phone was. Could it really be Shinjulia's new girlfriend? Before she knew it, it was already the second half of the night. Yi Qianqian didn't know what time it was before she finally fell asleep. Due to the recent series of events, she had taken a lot of leave for no reason. Although the chief editor wasn't happy about it, she expressed her understanding. The next day was Tuesday. After Yi Qianqian returned from Yin Town, she had to go back no matter what. When she arrived at the office, it was a battered day. She worked overtime until late at night. Yi Qianqian only came out of the office at 9:30 p.m. For some reason, she didn't want to go home. When she got home, it was empty. There was no one waiting for her, and no one had prepared everything for her return. It was so lonely. After walking around the Connecticut River for a while, he slowly walked back to his house. The next morning, Yi Qianqian got up early. She went for a jog on a whim before going to work. When it was almost time to knock off at noon, she suddenly thought of looking for Shinjulia. On a whim, she wanted to ask who the woman was, and why she had picked up his call at that time. The thought came to her without much thought. Yi Qianqian tidied up. Just as she was about to go downstairs, she suddenly felt that her current identity wasn't suitable for such things. However, despite the thought, Yi Qianqian still walked out uncontrollably. There was a subway station downstairs of Eurasian Comics, and Huxin Hospital was also near the subway station. It took her 8 stops to reach Huxin Hospital in 20 minutes. Yi Qianqian walked to the psychology department. As soon as she entered, she ran into Shinjulia's colleague whom she had met once. When Lao Zhou saw Yi Qianqian, he was a little surprised and exclaimed, "Hey, aren't you that?" Yi Qianqian smiled and replied, "Hello, I'm looking for Shinjulia." Lao Zhou smiled awkwardly and said, "You and Brother Shin really broke up?" Yi Qianqian felt a little awkward. She half-jokingly said, "How did you find out? What's your relationship with Shinjulia?" "Huh." Lao Zhou scratched his head. "Brother Shin has been transferred to the capital. He's been there for a few days." Yi Qianqian looked up in surprise. "Back to the capital already?" Lao Zhou saw the look in her eyes and nodded. "Is his hand better?" Wouldn't it be bad if he didn't recover from such a serious injury? When Lao Zhou heard this, he felt a little awkward. He said, "Brother Shin has been in a bad mood for the past few days. His hand hasn't even fully recovered yet, and he's already going back to work in the capital. He doesn't take good care of himself either. I'm afraid he'll get sick." "Oh, thank you for telling me." Chapter 1799. It doesn't matter. There are problems between us too. It's none of your business. Yi Qianqian was well aware of it. Between her and Shinjulia, It was like a substandard house. It looked like a tall building that was built on top of one another. But in reality, the most important part was that the foundation was built very crudely. The slightest movement would cause the majestic building to shake. Then, when they weren't paying attention, it would suddenly collapse and seriously injure them. Yi Qianqian was currently seriously injured. Lao Zhou saw that Yi Qianqian was in a bad mood and said, "Sister-in-law, why don't I treat you to a meal as an apology? I'll call Xiaogu." "There's no need. Xiaogu is a fresh meat in our department. He seems to be on good terms with the girl, who took care of Brother Shin for a few days. It's because he's close to the girl that we misunderstood. At the end of the day, he's the one who's at fault. There's no need. Thank you. I'm going back. Goodbye." "Sister-in-law." "Don't call me sister-in-law," Yi Qianqian interrupted Lao Zhou. "I can't accept that. We've already broken up." With that, Yi Qianqian turned around and walked away quickly. Lao Zhou looked at Yi Qianqian's slender and frail figure from behind. He couldn't say a single word. Lao Zhou watched Yi Qianqian's silhouette disappear into the corridor before he picked up his phone and called Shinjilia. In the capital, the moment Shinjilia returned, he was scheduled to attend a few meetings in the hospital. After the meetings, he had a 4-hour consultation session. He was busy for many days without a break. A doctor in the capital hospital suddenly got into a car accident. There was no one to take care of the patients and a bunch of things under his care. The hospitals in the capital were not like those in Kingstown. They were short-staffed and worked at a faster pace. There were even more patients coming to the psychology department. Therefore, the person in charge of the hospital applied to have Shinjilia transferred back. When they heard that Shinjilia had a girlfriend in Kingstown, they thought it would take some effort. They didn't expect Shinjilia to agree without hesitation. While everyone was pleasantly surprised, they also handed everything over to him as a matter of course. It was 12:30 p.m. in Beijing. Shinjilia had been busy for most of the day. When he finally had a hot meal, he received a call from Lao Zhou. When he saw that it was Lao Zhou, Shinjilia wasn't in a hurry. He slowly finished the food in his mouth before he picked up the phone and placed it on speaker. He picked up his spoon again and asked, "Hello. What about dinner?" "Yeah, I just rested." "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I just wanted to tell you that your woman came looking for you just now." Shinjilia stopped eating and his chewing slowed down. "She doesn't seem to know that you've been transferred back to the capital. She looks much thinner than last time, and she doesn't look very well." Elder Zhou scratched his head and said, "I say, Brother Shin, since both of you aren't happy about breaking up, why did you still want to break up? Isn't it a bad thing to make everyone sad?" "Okay, I got it." "Ah, that's it. What else?" I can't talk anymore. I'm busy. I still have a bunch of things to do after dinner. I'm hanging up." "Brother Shin, don't you think you're being too heartless?" Chapter 1800. Lao Zhou didn't understand. When he heard the busy tone on the other end of the phone, he felt that they were a little baffled. Now that the woman had come knocking on his door, wasn't it obvious what she was trying to say? She wanted to get back together. But now the man was putting on airs? After Shinjilia hung up the phone, he stopped eating and stared at his phone. "Yi Qianqian actually went to the hospital to look for me? Did she change her mind and change her mind? But why didn't she call me? Why didn't she even send me a text or a WeChat message?" Shinjilia found it a little strange. His thumb stroked the phone, and his emotions were a little complicated. However, deep in his heart, there was an obvious and uncontrollable joy boiling up, an indescribable joy quietly ascending. But he was also worried that his thoughts were just wishful thinking. If he suddenly called her, would he be rejected again? Shinjilia was a little nervous. Before he could take action, someone called out from outside, "Dr. Shen." "Yes." Shinjilia looked up and looked outside. A petite young lady in her early 20s walked in with a lunchbox in her hand. She had a big smile on her face as she said, "Dr. Shen, thank you for what you did just now. If it weren't for you, I really wouldn't know what to do. Women like that are the most troublesome. Next time you have to solve this kind of problem on your own. I can help you once, but I can't help you a second time. I've seen many women like that. The key is that a young lady like you shouldn't speak carelessly if you don't know what to say. The young lady stuck out her tongue and said, I was wrong, but you're really amazing. You made that woman shut up with just a few words. I admire you so much. When Shen Julia heard that, he harumphed and turned his head away. He said, save the flattery. Finish your meal and get to work. I'm serious. I really admire you. Look at how capable you are. You're so handsome, and yet you don't allow people to speak the truth? The more the young lady spoke, the redder her face became. Shen Julia had a look of disdain on his face. He lowered his head and ate. As he spoke, he said, just keep the truth to yourself. I'll be proud if you say it out loud. The young lady burst out laughing. She looked up at Shen Julia and asked, Dr. Shen, I heard that you've broken up with your girlfriend? When Shen Julia heard that, he rolled his eyes at her in annoyance. It's those little rascals gossiping behind the scenes again, isn't it? I knew they would definitely cause trouble and spout nonsense. When the young lady heard this, the smile on her face faded a little. She said no. Shen Julia looked up and said with a half-smile, Why? Are you still hoping that I'll split it? How can that be? You have to be happy yourself. But since you guys are fine, why did you change your phone's contact? When he heard this, Shen Julia paused in the middle of eating and looked up at her with a sharp look in his eyes. How did you know? Hearing this, the girl looked a little guilty and immediately said, I accidentally saw it once. How did you see it? Shen Julia put down his chopsticks and wiped his mouth with a piece of tissue. You went through my phone? No, your phone has a password. How could I find it? Chapter 1801. He couldn't stop asking questions. A trace of embarrassment flashed across the girl's face. She said, I was just guessing. How can an ordinary person's phone not have a password? Is that so? Shen Julia's face was full of suspicion. Do you think I'll believe you? F***ck, what I said is true. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. The little girl stood up and wanted to leave with the lunchbox. Shen Julia narrowed his eyes and said, You're feeling guilty. The little girl's movements paused. She turned her head and said somewhat angrily, Why are you so annoying? Didn't you like me just now? Didn't you say that you admired me? Why have you changed so quickly? You peeked at my phone. Lin Meow Meow, tell me the truth. Lin Meow Meow stomped her foot and replied, Oh no, I didn't. It's just that the last time we were working overtime together, weren't you in the hospital? I went back to the office first and saw that your cell phone was ringing. I took a look at it and saw that the name on it was Yi Qianqian who dumped me. That's how I knew. Shen Julia frowned when he heard that. Shen Julia unlocked his phone and opened his contact list. While he was looking at the record, he also saw other notes in it. There were no changes, but there was no record of Yi Qianqian calling. He placed the phone on the table. Didn't you say that you had a call? What about now? Seeing this, Lin Meow Meow lowered her head and said meekly, I deleted it. How did you delete it? I'll use an AI robot. An AI robot can delete it? Yes, AI robots are very powerful. Alright, I'll give it a try. As Shen Julia spoke, he picked up his phone and pressed the middle button for a few seconds before saying, Siri, help me delete Lin Meow Meow's contact number. When Lin Meow Meow heard this, her heart raced like thunder. The phone quickly replied, Sorry, I can't delete any contact information. Hearing this, Lin Meow Meow's face turned even redder. She was so embarrassed that she could die. But in the end, she still stomped her foot and turned to look at Shen Julia. Oh, I can't take it anymore. I'll tell you the truth. Shen Julia leaned back in his chair and looked at Lin Meow Meow calmly. He was all ears. Actually, I've been paying attention to you ever since you came. Although I've only known you for a few days, I've heard a lot of legends about you before this. I really admire you, so I like to follow you around. Once I saw your password, 0126, so You answered her call? Yes. Lin Meow Meow's head was almost buried in her neck. Shen Julia's face was a little dark, and he didn't look too good. Lin Miao Miao felt even more embarrassed. She said shyly, I heard that you were dumped and looked very sad. You're more emotional than before, and your mood and personality are different. So I think it must be this woman's fault, so I wanted to stand up for you. Why are you so nosy? Shinjilia gritted his teeth. You're the one who's going to get me into trouble. Do you know that? Chapter 1802. What right do you have to do this? Shinjilia stood up. His face darkened. Do you know how much trouble you're causing me by doing this? Lin Miao Miao shrank back a little nervously and said, I'll apply to have you transferred out of my office. I'll find another assistant. Shinjilia stood up and picked up his phone. Get out. Dr. Shen, I'm doing this for your own good. You, get out. Shinjilia's face was stern. There was no mercy on his face. Lin Miao Miao had heard rumors about Shinjilia. It was said that this man appeared to be sloppy and rarely got angry, but when he did, few people could withstand it. Moreover, Shinjilia looked like he was serious. Lin Miao Miao didn't dare to say anything more. She hugged her lunchbox and walked out dejectedly. Shinjilia called Yi Qianqian. She seemed to be busy with something. No one picked up the phone for a long time. At that moment, Shinjilia was actually glad that Yi Qianqian hadn't blacklisted him. But why didn't she pick up the phone? When Yi Qianqian walked out of the hospital, she found a random fast food restaurant nearby and bought something to eat. After eating, he rushed to the company in a hurry. After about 10 minutes, she arrived at the office. There were many people on the subway. There were no seats, and the train was swaying. Yi Qianqian didn't look at her phone. When she arrived at the office, she picked up her phone and saw that there were 2 missed calls. It was Shinjilia. When she saw the name, Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. It hadn't been long, but Yi Qianqian's palms were already sweaty. She hesitated to call back, but just as she was about to make the call, Yi Qianqian cut off the call. Shinjilia didn't call me at this time because his colleague at Kingstown Hospital told him that I went to look for him. Did he? If I call back, what should I say? Going to the hospital to look for him was just an impulse. Now that she had calmed down, Yi Qianqian began to regret it. The overwhelming regret hit her. She looked at the phone and hesitated for a moment. In the end, she didn't call back. Just as Yi Qianqian was about to put her phone away, it suddenly vibrated. A melodious ringtone followed. It was Shinjilia. When Yi Qianqian saw those 3 words, her limbs began to stiffen. What should I say? After holding the phone for a while, Yi Qianqian finally answered the call. Hello. It was a familiar voice. Although the tone of her voice had changed slightly over the phone, in Shinjilia's ears, it was as melodious as a melody. Yeah, I heard that you went to our hospital today. Shinjilia's tone was calm, and he pretended that nothing had happened. Yi Qianqian felt a little awkward. She felt extremely embarrassed at that moment. But he still pretended to be calm and said, Yes, I've been feeling a little uncomfortable recently, so I went to the hospital to have a checkup. I happened to pass by the psychology department and thought that I haven't seen you for a long time, so I wanted to say hello. I see. Shinjilia was a little disappointed. Yi Qianqian's heart raced as she replied, Yeah. Why did you suddenly go back to the capital? It was transferred by the hospital. Recently, something happened in the capital, and we are short of manpower, so the hospital specially arranged a small assistant for me. So busy? Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. Your assistant is also a doctor, right? Yes, she was an intern, but she's gone now. Dash. Chapter 1803. Oh, I see. It seems like you're quite lucky with women. Yi Qianqian held the phone in her hand and sat in her seat. Her tone was a little ambiguous. Hearing her half-joking tone, Shinjilia's previously depressed mood suddenly relaxed. He chuckled and asked, What's wrong? Are you jealous? Of course. If I had a beautiful woman by my side like you, my mood at work would be different. That's true. You're so happy now. Something happened in my family recently. Do you know about it? What happened? My grandfather passed away. Some time ago, Shinjulia had brought a lot of Alzheimer's medicine for his grandfather. Now those things have been thrown away by Yi Zhenhua. Shinjulia was silent for a moment before he said, Yeah, I heard about it. Yi Qianqian would be the first to suspect Yi Qianqian. In other words, Shinjulia might have known about it a long time ago, but he was stingy with his condolences? Yi Qianqian felt uncomfortable when she thought about it. Shinjulia quickly said, Your sister said you were very sad, but I was afraid that you would be even sadder if you heard her voice, so That's my sister. Yi Qianqian found it a little funny. Her lips curled up. But I didn't expect you to be so self-aware. You're right. If I heard your voice at that time, I would indeed be very sad. Shinjulia had expected it, but he still smiled bitterly when he heard that. But Yi Qianqian's voice came through again. Shinjulia held the phone in his hand and remained silent. I'm quite happy to hear your voice now. Ha! Shinjulia's heart beat faster, but he still pretended to be calm and asked after a long pause. Did you know that something happened to Fang Tongtong recently? Shinjulia really didn't know. When he heard Yi Qianqian's question, he became curious and asked, What happened? This was almost an instinctive reaction, but after Shinjulia asked it, he felt that something was wrong. If he asked that question, would it mean that he felt something different about Fang Tongtong? When he realized this, Shinjulia immediately changed his tone and said, It's fine if you don't want to tell me. I don't really want to know. Yi Qianqian replied, She was raped by a man who was older than her father. When Shinjulia heard this, his eyes widened in disbelief. No way. When I heard about it, I was shocked too. I found it hard to believe. Later, when I went to the hospital, she was crying so hard that she fainted. During the surgery, her mother was crying so hard too. Yi Qianqian's voice became softer. Shinjulia could imagine the expression on Yi Qianqian's face right now. After a moment of silence, he asked, Why did this happen? This was probably retribution. Yi Qianqian believed in that. The elders in her family would always tell her that people shouldn't do bad things. Otherwise, bad luck would befall them one day. In the past, he had always felt that pitiful people were hateful. However, after what happened to Fang Tongtong, Yi Qianqian couldn't bring herself to like that woman at all. If Fang Tongtong hadn't gone to her house that day, would such a thing have happened? Chapter 1804. Ever since Fang Tongtong was hospitalized, Yi Qianqian had only seen her twice. She was unwilling to meet Fang Tongtong. She didn't even offer her condolences. After learning that Fang Tongtong was fine, Yi Qianqian immediately returned to Kingstown. Sometimes, Yi Qianqian felt that her heart was cold and hard. Otherwise, why didn't she offer any condolences to Fang Tongtong after what happened to her after being a friend for so many years? However, she couldn't bear to part with Shinjulia, a man whom she had known for less than a year and had been together for less than 3 months. Every time she thought about how she had lost this man because of a few slanderous words, Yi Qianqian felt as if her heart was being sliced into pieces. At that moment, when she heard Shinjulia's question, Yi Qianqian replied, This is fate. Shinjulia was speechless. After a long silence, he said, What a pity. Shinjulia really felt that it was a pity. But other than pity, he didn't have any other thoughts. I'm sorry, Yi Qianqian said softly. Shinjulia was silent as he waited for her to continue. Let's meet up, Yi Qianqian said. Shinjulia's heart suddenly relaxed. In an instant, he felt as if he had grasped something. When? Shinjulia pretended to be calm and asked. This weekend, okay? I've been on leave for too long recently. There are a lot of things to do. I'll go to the capital to look for you on the weekend. There's no need, Shinjulia said softly. Yi Qianqian's heart tightened when she heard that. She said nervously, It's okay. I'll go to Kingstown. Shinjulia's voice was gentle and cautious. Your time in the capital is too tight. You're so busy with work. It's too tiring to travel back and forth in only 2 days. Yeah. Is food and accommodation included? Yes, Yi Qianqian answered with a red face. Her colleagues looked over. When they saw Yi Qianqian's blushing face, they smiled suggestively. Yi Qianqian saw the gazes around her, and her expression became even more forlorn. Fortunately, they were still some distance away from her. At least they couldn't hear her when she spoke. She whispered into the phone. I recently learned how to cook curry rice. I'll cook it for you when you come. The corners of Shenjilia's lips curled up, and he replied in a soft and affectionate voice, Yeah. I'm going to work. I'm hanging up. Yes. Yi Qianqian hung up the phone reluctantly. She looked at the string of numbers on the screen and decided to add a note to his name. The broken relationship ex-boyfriend. Yep. He was my ex-boyfriend for the time being. If one day, Shenjilia agreed to reconcile with her, and they could let bygones be bygones, she would change her mind. The discomfort that had accumulated for so many days seemed to have been released, and even the work became more energetic. Sissy's name was famous in the art circle for being cold and aloof. But today, Sissy seemed to be in a particularly good mood. Not only did she talk a lot, but she even sent a love pack. This made the painters feel extremely flattered. At the same time, they immediately started to reflect on themselves. Did they do anything wrong to make this guy start to set up a trap for them? Yi Qianqian was speechless. The work accumulated over the past few days wasn't something that could be done easily. As expected, he worked overtime until 9 p.m. today. Chapter 1805. When she took the evening bus home, she was exhausted. When she opened the door, she found that the lights in the house were on. Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat, and she felt her body tremble. It was daytime when she went out, so it was impossible for someone to forget to turn off the lights. Therefore, the lights must have been turned on at night. Yi Qianqian's hair stood on end. She stood at the door and stared at the house. She didn't dare to move or go in. However, there was no movement inside. Yi Qianqian swallowed a mouthful of saliva and finally decided to brace herself to walk in. She took small steps carefully. Creak. It was the sound of the door opening. Yi Qianqian was so scared that her whole body almost jumped up. She turned her head and saw a man standing behind her. Shenjilia raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw her stiff expression. When Yi Qianqian saw him, she was a little surprised and said, You? Shenjilia seemed to have taken a shower. He was wearing a light blue top and beige shorts. He looked very homely. His hair was half dry, but he looked very clean. The fragrance of shower gel permeated his body. Looking at Yi Qianqian's face, Shenjilia walked over. Yi Qianqian's body was tense and stiff. She looked at him and blinked. Shenjilia stood in front of her for a moment and stared into her eyes. After a moment, his gaze moved away from her eyes and landed on her lips. Yi Qianqian's heart suddenly skipped a beat. What is he going to do? Is he going to kiss me the moment he comes? Yi Qianqian's face became hot, and her bare face began to redden at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, Shenjilia's eyes only lingered on her face for a while. Then he turned around and unintentionally muttered, You didn't even close the door. As he spoke, he had already walked to the door. Yi Qianqian felt a little embarrassed, and her face became even redder. She clenched her fists in anger, stomped her feet, and gritted her teeth. She shouted, Why are you here? There was no sound behind her. When Yi Qianqian turned around angrily, she suddenly bumped into a wall of flesh. Shenjilia's body didn't move. Just as Yi Qianqian was about to retreat, Shenjilia suddenly reached out and wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly against his chest. Yi Qianqian felt as if her heart had skipped a beat. She almost forgot to breathe. His body tensed up as he stared at Shenjilia's light blue top, not daring to move. Didn't you ask me to come? Are you trying to play dumb now? Shenjilia lowered his head and looked at Yi Qianqian's pink face. His eyes darkened. I didn't. Without waiting for Yi Qianqian to finish her sentence, Shenjilia suddenly closed the distance between them and stared at Yi Qianqian with his amber eyes. Yi Qianqian couldn't say anything else. She looked at Shenjilia, and her heart was beating incredibly fast. This wasn't the first time he had gotten so close, but why was he so nervous? Yi Qianqian felt like she was going crazy, but when she looked at Shenjulia, she couldn't help but want to get closer to him. Yi Qianqian stood on her tiptoes and kissed his lips. It was like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, but it was enough to arouse a certain man who had been restless for a long time. The impulse that he had been restraining for a long time immediately surged out under this gentle kiss, and he could no longer suppress it. Chapter 1806. Yi Qianqian gasped under the pressure. Without warning, her mouth was attacked. Shenjulia's passion seemed to be even more ferocious than before. Under such intense pressure, Yi Qianqian almost couldn't breathe. She turned her face to the side to breathe. Shenjulia immediately moved away from her lips and used his teeth to tear open her neckline. Yi Qianqian cried out in surprise and immediately covered her chest. But Shenjulia had already reached out his claws and ravaged them with ease. Shenjulia lifted the hem of her shirt and reached his hand inside. Stop. Yi Qianqian covered her body. She felt so nervous that she was about to suffocate. They hadn't seen each other for so long. Was it really appropriate for them to be so passionate as soon as they arrived? Besides, didn't they break up? If they were to go to bed at such a time, what kind of relationship did they have? Yi Qianqian had hundreds of concerns in her heart, but when the words came to her mouth, they became, "I haven't showered yet." Shenjulia laughed out loud. He pressed his whole body against hers and said in a low voice, "I don't mind." Yi Qianqian didn't even have a chance to struggle before she was pressed down by him and stripped of all her clothes. They hadn't seen each other for more than 10 days. They hadn't lived together for nearly a month. Shenjulia couldn't stand it anymore. Now that the little sheep was in front of him, how could the big wild wolf not eat her? Shenjulia wrapped her up and carried her into the room. Yi Qianqian felt like she was floating. After she was placed on the bed, Shenjulia pressed down on her. Before she could react, she felt her body swell. The feeling of being filled made Yi Qianqian almost cry out. Yi Qianqian opened her blurry eyes and looked at Shenjulia in front of her. She gasped and asked, "Is it too fast?" Shenjulia leaned over her and whispered into her ear, "I won't." With a wicked smile, Shenjulia pressed his lips against hers and whispered, "You're already prepared." Yi Qianqian's heart sank. Yi Qianqian's face turned even redder. She pinched his hand. Shenjulia had an even better way to punish her. He pressed down on her heavily. Yi Qianqian gasped and screamed. She threw her head back and hugged his back. Shenjulia sealed her lips with his. Wordlessly, he began to move with all his might. When it was almost over, Yi Qianqian panted heavily and stuttered, "What kind of relationship do we have?" Shenjulia didn't say a word. He quickly pushed her to the highest heaven once again. Finally, he sank down heavily and asked in a hoarse voice, "What do you think?" "I think." She felt that they were a little embarrassed. They had clearly broken up, and they hadn't even officially gotten back together yet, but they had already rolled into bed together. What was this? Didn't we already break up? "You're not my boyfriend anymore, so isn't it bad for us to be like this?" Shenjulia wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he embraced her and kissed her gently on the lips. In a soft voice he said, "You're not young anymore. Do you want to consider getting a husband?" Yi Qianqian was exhausted, but when she heard his words, she immediately felt energized. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Her mood seemed to have been refreshed. "It's okay if he's not your boyfriend. He can be your husband, the father of your child, and the head of your family in the future." Chapter 1807. Shenjulia gazed at her and raised his eyebrows slightly. Yi Qianqian stared at him and asked, "Are you proposing?" Shenjulia was very sure. His lips tightened as he slowly and confidently said, "This is the last time." What he meant was that if Yi Qianqian didn't agree, he wouldn't bring it up again. Or perhaps what Shenjulia meant was that right now at this very moment, he wanted to end things with her. Either forever together, or not together at all. Yi Qianqian wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him on the lips. She asked, "What about your ring?" When Shenjulia heard that, the tightened line on his lips finally relaxed. When he saw that Yi Qianqian's complexion looked much better, he smiled and reached out to touch the top of her head. Yi Qianqian shrank back a little. Then, as if by magic, Shenjulia took out a velvet box. Yi Qianqian widened her eyes in disbelief. She just casually mentioned it. She didn't expect this guy to have already prepared it. Shenjulia pulled himself up, and the feeling of being filled disappeared in an instant. Yi Qianqian felt her whole body tremble. She put her legs down and shrank back. Shenjulia grabbed her left hand and stuffed the ring onto her ring finger. "That's settled then. Come with me to the capital this weekend." Today was Wednesday. There were only 2 days left. However, Yi Qianqian's focus wasn't on that. Instead, she was looking at the diamond ring on her finger. It was beautiful, and the diamond was huge. It sparkled brightly and dazzled Yi Qianqian's eyes. "Do you like it?" Shenjulia interlocked his fingers with hers, and his gaze fell on her fingers. Yi Qianqian smiled and nodded. "I like it." A smile appeared on Shenjulia's face. "There's one more." He picked up the box and saw a man's ring inside. "Help me put it on." Yi Qianqian picked up the ring and looked at Shenjulia's outstretched hand. She clasped the ring on his ring finger and asked, "When did you buy this?" "Very early. As long as you nod, I can take it out at any time." Shenjulia looked at his hand with satisfaction, and the smile on his face widened. Yi Qianqian suddenly felt guilty. She had rejected him so many times, but Shenjulia remained in the same spot. Fortunately, he was still at the same spot. Fortunately, he didn't go far, and fortunately, he gave himself one last chance to make a choice. She crawled up and hugged him. "Thank you, old Shen. Why do you have to be so nice to me?" Shenjulia asked. Shenjulia hugged her back. His gaze was gentle as he whispered, "You're worth it." It was simple and clear. It was rare for Shenjulia to say something like that. Yi Qianqian felt like laughing and crying at the same time. Yi Qianqian hugged him tighter and sobbed softly. She said, "I'm sorry. I didn't trust you at all. I thought everything Feng Tongtong said was true. I never doubted her. I'm sorry, old Shen." "She told you that I slept with her?" Shenjulia gently pushed her away and looked at her with a dark expression. Yi Qianqian nodded. "She told me that what happened that night with you was just an accident. She felt sorry for me, so I..." Shenjulia's face darkened, and he asked unhappily, "How could you believe something like that?" She grew up with me. I don't think she would lie to me on purpose." Chapter 1808. Yi Qianqian felt guilty and lowered her head, not daring to look at him. Shenjulia was so angry that he gritted his teeth and said, "You're going to piss me off. Men, aren't they animals that think with their lower bodies? Tong Tong's figure is better than mine, her breasts are bigger than mine, her hair is longer than mine, and her legs are longer than mine. Furthermore, she's a virgin. Don't you men like virgins?" Yi Qianqian tried to defend herself, but she realized that what she said made no sense at all. "Bah! Weren't you a virgin when you were with me?" Shenjulia really wanted to poke her head out to see what was inside. "Why should I take responsibility for your best friend's virginity? Not to mention that I've never touched her, even if I did. You're the one who invited the wolf into the house. You know that your man is infinitely charming, yet you still dared to bring another woman to me. Aren't you digging a hole for yourself?" Yi Qianqian rolled her eyes at him. "That's because Feng Tongtong hasn't seen the world yet," Shenjulia said in annoyance. "Wait a minute." Shenjulia realized that the topic had gone astray, so he quickly changed the subject. "Where did you get that idea from? Do you think all men like to be single? Isn't that what normal men think?" Yi Qianqian asked with her eyes wide open. She really thought so. Didn't all men like all kinds of virgins? Shenjulia was speechless. He suppressed his anger and said, "You really don't understand men. The kind of men you're talking about are called scumbags. Only scumbags like to break women's virginity. It's like collecting stamps. I'm a good man. Besides, when you say a virgin, other than dirtying the sheets, there's nothing special about it. Do you really think so? What do you think? Yi Qianqian turned away. The more she listened, the more guilty she felt. In reality, Yi Qianqian was the one who trusted Feng Tongtong more. It had nothing to do with whether he was a man or not. Their relationship had been maintained for more than 10 years. After such a long time, it had almost become a habit. Unthinkingly and instinctively believe. It wasn't that Yi Qianqian didn't trust Shenjilia enough, but that she trusted Feng Tongtong too much. That was why such a situation had occurred. But now he laughed dryly and said, "Normal men don't think like you." Shenjilia suppressed it and said in a low voice, "Don't you know whether I'm normal or not?" Yi Qianqian blushed. "How would I know? It's not like I've ever had another man." Shenjilia was quite satisfied with her answer. He lifted the blanket and covered himself with it. Then he wrapped his entire body around her and said, "I haven't had any other women either. We're even." "Aya, don't crush me, you're too heavy." The relationship between husband and wife is built by pressure. If you don't pressure them, how are you going to nurture your relationship? "I'm so sleepy, ugh." Shenjilia didn't give her a chance to speak. He grabbed her roughly and started a new round of war with her. Yi Qianqian struggled and finally avoided his lips. She gasped and shouted, "Condom. Once I'm pregnant, I'll give birth." "No. Getting married and having children is a matter of course. You've already worn the ring. And now you want to go back on your words? Then I'll return the ring to you." "It's too late." Shenjilia pushed against her and filled her up. "From the moment you nodded, you can't go back on your words anymore. What will happen if I go back on my words? I'll let you have children." Chapter 1809. Yi Qianqian lowered her head to look at the man in front of her. A soft moan came from her throat. All her words were drowned out by his overwhelming strength. The next day, when Yi Qianqian's alarm clock rang, she felt that she hadn't slept for long. She turned over in a daze and suddenly felt that something was wrong with her body. She suddenly woke up with a start. She turned her head to look at her side, and suddenly realized that it was Shenjilia. Shenjilia was back. Shenjilia was awakened by her sudden reaction. When he saw her horrified expression, he reached out and hugged her. "Good morning." His lazy voice carried the faint huskiness of a man who hadn't woken up yet. Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She blinked her eyes. Shenjilia held her in his arms and asked softly, "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian shrank back and looked down. She saw that both of their bodies were bare. It was like a dream. "Time to get up and go to work. Lie down a little longer." Shenjilia's voice was calm. He rested his chin on her smooth shoulder and gently caressed it. Yi Qianqian felt her skin itch from his caress. She shrank her neck and pushed his face away. "Go away." Shenjilia leaned over and kissed her lips. Yi Qianqian struggled for a while. When she realized that she couldn't open her eyes, she gave up. Shenjilia reluctantly held her in his arms. After rubbing against her, he realized that he couldn't stop. Unknowingly, his body had already been contaminated with a body of fire. That originally calm and tranquil body, after a short while, impressively stood upright. Yi Qianqian could clearly feel the change and struggled with all her might. Shenjilia released her. Yi Qianqian immediately moved to the back and shouted, "I'm going to work." Shenjilia was amused by Yi Qianqian's blushing face. He rested his head on one hand and looked at Yi Qianqian holding her chest with a red face. He teased, "It's not like I haven't seen it before. I've seen what I should have seen and done what I shouldn't have done. What's there to be shy about?" Yi Qianqian's face burned even more. She felt uncomfortable looking at Shenjilia. She whispered, "I'm just not used to it. Why did you suddenly come back?" "Yes, I'm back." Shenjilia lifted the blanket and was about to get out of bed. "Remember to prepare for the trip to the capital. I'll let my family know when I get back." "You're not coming with me?" Yi Qianqian looked at Shenjilia with her eyes wide open. Shenjilia boldly stood up. He didn't bother to cover himself at all. She turned her head away in embarrassment. When Shinjulia saw that, he couldn't help but laugh. Shinjulia was in a good mood. He slowly took out his clothes and said, "I'm going back to the capital now. There's still a lot of work to do. I skipped work yesterday afternoon." "Pooh. No way." Shinjulia glanced at her indifferently and asked, "What do you think?" She felt that Shinjulia had just been transferred to the capital, so there were bound to be a lot of things to do. It had only been a few days since he had flown back from the imperial capital. He must have skipped a lot of procedures in the process. If he went back, there would probably be a lot of things to settle. Before Yi Qianqian could figure it out, Shinjulia had already walked up to her. Yi Qianqian took a step back when she saw his nakedness. Chapter 18:10. Yi Qianqian looked at him without saying a word. "When you said you wanted to meet me, I almost lost my mind. At that time, I still had 2 treatments to do, but I still went to the airport without hesitation and booked the earliest flight to Kingstown." Yi Qianqian's heart palpitated. She looked at Shinjulia, but she felt a little unfamiliar with him. Shinjulia would never say such things in the past. Or rather, Shinjulia would never be so emotional in the past. "What's wrong with me now? What's wrong with me today? When I arrived in Kingstown, I didn't call you. I just waited in the house for you to get off work, but I felt like an outsider." Shinjulia gently stroked her chin. "Including when I made love to you last night." The 2 explicit words made Yi Qianqian feel like her whole body was about to crumble. Her scalp went numb, and her face turned red. "I felt like I was raping you instead of making love to my own woman." Yi Qianqian gently placed her hand on his waist and asked, "Why would you have such thoughts?" "Yi Qianqian, I love you so much." Shinjulia held her hand and gazed at her with a pair of amber eyes. He whispered, "I don't know what I mean to you, but I still took out the ring. This is the last time. If you agree to marry me, we'll be together forever. If you don't, what will happen to you?" "I'll go back." Shinjulia pinched her chin and leaned his face close to hers. "I'll never come to Kingstown again. I'll never see you again." Shinjulia gazed at her with a serious expression. Yi Qianqian's heart tightened, and a sense of nervousness followed. "So this is really the last time." Yi Qianqian held his face in her hands, stood on her tiptoes and kissed him on the lips. "Let's get married." Shinjulia's heart fluttered. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pushed her against the wall. He couldn't help but be entangled with her. The high-quality mattress was shaken by them for a long time before they stopped. Yi Qianqian was late again as expected. The chief editor stood at the door of the office with an ugly expression on her face and roared, "Yi Qianqian, you're getting more and more out of hand. Do you know what you've done? You should count how many times you've been late this month. Don't you know how many days of leave you've taken this month? If you don't finish your work, how am I supposed to raise your bonus?" Yi Qianqian didn't dare to speak. She lowered her head. When the chief editor saw Yi Qianqian's behavior, she was filled with anger and said, "Don't think that you can be willful just because you have the best sales. There are plenty of people with good sales. Don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you've fallen out of love." Yi Qianqian stuck out her tongue and said, "Well, I got back together with him." "They've gotten back together?" The editor couldn't believe it. "Didn't you say that they broke up?" Ahem. "Yes, but we can still get back together." "You got back together with her yourself?" "Well, he came looking for me yesterday." Yi Qianqian's face was a little red. She raised her head and glanced at the chief editor. The editor-in-chief saw the obvious hickey on her neck and immediately understood what had happened. His expression darkened even further. "So you two reconciled after having sex?" Cough, cough. Chapter 18:11. Yi Qianqian shuddered and hurried out of the chief editor's office without hesitation. But just as he was about to step out, He suddenly caught a glimpse of the beautiful sparkling diamond ring on his finger. She immediately turned back and reached out her hand. I'm getting married soon. Give me your blessings. The chief editor clenched her teeth and almost threw her phone at her. Yi Qianqian quickly ducked and ran away. The chief editor retracted her hand and made the call angrily. When the call went through, she changed her expression and said pitifully, "Hubby, please comfort me." When Yi Qianqian got home, Shenjulia was already gone. Yi Qianqian tidied up everything and lay on the bed. She couldn't help but lift her ring again and wave it in front of her face. The corners of her lips curled up unconsciously. Yi Qianqian lay down and hummed a tune. She had been looking at it all day, but she couldn't get enough of such beauty. She closed her eyes. She could almost imagine how she would look in her wedding gown. Beautiful, very beautiful. It was the weekend, and the sun was scorching hot in Kingstown. Yi Qianqian packed 2 sets of clothes, bought some Kingstown specialties and health supplements, and set off for the capital. After a 3-hour flight, she arrived at the Capital International Airport. She called Shenjulia as soon as she got off the plane. It rang a few times before Shenjulia picked up the phone. It sounded a little noisy on the other end. Hello, I'm off the plane. Are you here? Oh, so fast. I'm still at the hospital. I had to rush over because of something. Why don't you take a taxi to my hospital? It's about 40 kilometers from the airport, so you should be able to get there in an hour. Give me a call when you arrive. Yi Qianqian was a little disappointed, but she could imagine that he was really busy. That was why he couldn't pick her up. Yi Qianqian agreed and walked out on her own. She took a taxi and headed to the address provided by Shenjulia. Soon, she arrived at a hospital. It was still Huxin Hospital. Yi Qianqian didn't call Shenjulia. Instead, she went straight to the psychology department. When she went up, the people around her were very busy. Almost no one saw her. Yi Qianqian pulled her small suitcase to the information desk and said to the nurse, "Hello, I'm looking for Shenjulia." Lin Miaomiao was in the middle of organizing some documents when she looked up and saw Yi Qianqian's face. With one look, she recognized the person as Shenjulia's phone screensaver. Lin Miaomiao immediately felt uncomfortable. She looked at her with a bad attitude and said, "Director Shen is busy. You can register with him first." His tone was a little impatient, which made people very uncomfortable. Yi Qianqian hadn't expected the attitude of the people in the hospital to be so bad. I'm not here to see a doctor. I'm his girlfriend." Lin Miaomiao deliberately sized her up and said, "That's impossible. I've never heard of Director Shen having a girlfriend. Also, how could Director Shen like you? Recently, there have been many people pretending to be Director Shen's girlfriend. How did you know him?" Yi Qianqian was infuriated. She could no longer keep up the pretense. The image of a virtuous lady that she had been trying to maintain collapsed. With a dark expression, she said, "How can you speak like that? Is it true that no one has complained about the hospital's information desk?" Chapter 1812. Yi Qianqian suppressed her temper and asked, "Pester endlessly? How am I pestering you? I told you to leave, but you're still here. Isn't that unreasonable?" Lin Miaomiao looked disdainful. She lowered her head and pretended to mutter, "Why are there all kinds of people in this day and age? Each one is more shameless than the other." Yi Qianqian's anger flared. At that moment, a man in a white coat walked out from behind her. Yi Qianqian glanced at him and looked at the name tag on the young girl's chest again. She asked, "Your name is Lin Miaomiao, isn't it?" "That's me. My name is Lin Miaomiao. You want to file a complaint against me, don't you? Go ahead. Let's see what you're going to do. Is the attitude of the people in your hospital so bad? Why is the difference between Huxin Hospital in the capital and Huxin Hospital in Kingstown so big? I told you to register if you're sick. Aren't you annoying? You're the one who's sick. I said I'm here to look for Shenjulia. Shenjulia doesn't want to see anyone. Leave." Yi Qianqian was filled with anger. She looked up at the man behind her and said, I'm Shinjilia's girlfriend. When Lin Miao Miao saw Yi Qianqian looking behind her, she immediately turned around. Her heart skipped a beat. The man glanced at Lin Miao Miao, but he still walked up to Yi Qianqian and said, "So it's you, sister-in-law. Brother Shin just told me to take you to his office. Come with me." "Is that so?" Yi Qianqian raised her eyebrows slightly. Her gaze shifted to Lin Miao Miao. "Since Shenjilia told you, wouldn't the nurse at the information desk know even more?" "Yes, Director Shin just told us." As he spoke, the man looked at Lin Miao Miao and said, "Didn't Director Shin just tell you that his girlfriend would be coming and he asked you to treat her well? What's wrong with you now?" Lin Miao Miao turned her head and said, "How do I know if it's real or fake? If I have to entertain everyone who pretends to be Director Shin's girlfriend, won't I die of exhaustion? That's why you scold everyone who comes looking for Shinjilia for being sick. You even accuse them of being unreasonable and calling them ugly in a roundabout way. You even invert the truth and pretend that you don't know anything. Do you have a grudge against Shinjilia?" Yi Qianqian looked at Lin Miao Miao without the slightest hint of politeness on her face. "You're just a nurse at the information desk. Are you sure you won't get a complaint if you treat a patient this way? What nonsense are you talking about? When did I do these things? Don't accuse me." The man was well aware of this. His expression did not look too good as he said, "Lin Miao Miao, you're representing the entire hospital's image by sitting here. Don't you even want to protect the hospital's image now?" "Dr. Li, I didn't. You know very well whether I have it or not." Yi Qianqian's expression was cold. "If it doesn't work, I'll just take a look at that thing." As she spoke, Yi Qianqian pointed at the thing above her head. Lin Miao Miao and Dr. Li both looked up. It was a probe. Lin Miao Miao's expression changed. She said, "Are you deliberately going against me? You know very well who's going against whom. Young lady, you're still young. You must not have heard of this saying, have you?" Chapter 1813. God is watching from above. As Yi Qianqian spoke, her gaze fell on the camera again. This is God. What exactly does he look like? We'll find out when we get to the surveillance room later. Lin Miao Miao felt guilty. She looked at Yi Qianqian's angry expression and asked, "What exactly do you want?" "I should be the one asking you that." Yi Qianqian looked at Lin Miao Miao and finally turned her head away. She pulled her suitcase and looked at Dr. Li. "Where should I go to wait for my boyfriend?" Dr. Li was a little embarrassed, but he still turned around and said, "Come with me." Yi Qianqian didn't even look at Lin Miao Miao. She followed Dr. Li into the office. Shinjilia's office was very clean and very tidy. All the documents were stacked together, but they were labeled and bookmarked in a very organized manner. Yi Qianqian took a look at them. The handwriting was very beautiful and vigorous. It looked like they were just some casual notes. There was a stack of books on the desk in the office. Next to the books was a photo frame. Shinjilia was holding a woman in his arms and smiling brightly. It was a photo taken when they were in Venice. In the background, there were beautiful blue splashes of water. After the ripples, there were white clouds that contrasted against the beautiful and clean blue sky. When Yi Qianqian saw the photo, the corners of her lips curled up. She picked up a tissue and wiped the dust off it. It was really beautiful. Yi Qianqian stared at the photo. Then, she looked around in boredom as she waited for Shinjilia to return. However, Shinjilia seemed to be a little busy. Yi Qianqian sat in his office for about half an hour before Shinjilia finally returned. He had a mask hanging from one ear. He was looking at the medical records in his hands. As he walked, he said something to a nurse beside him. The nurse looked very young. She was probably in her early 20s. There were some pimples on her face. As she listened, she lowered her head and took notes seriously. Suddenly, Shinjilia raised his head. After glancing at Yi Qianqian, his eyes curved. He turned to his assistant and said, "That's all. Keep an eye on it for the next 2 days. If there's anything you don't know how to handle, you can ask Xiao Li and Xiao Zhou. I won't be coming over tomorrow. I might have to take a few days off in a few days. Ask Xiao Zhou to keep an eye on it." The young nurse nodded repeatedly. "All right, Chief Shun. I understand." As she spoke, the nurse seemed to notice Yi Qianqian's presence. She glanced at her and nodded with a smile. Yi Qianqian was the same. After a slight smile, the nurse carried the documents that Shen Jilia had handed over and left. Shen Jilia closed the office door and walked to his seat. Yi Qianqian sat in his chair. She stared at him as he walked toward her and blinked. With a table between them, Shen Jilia bent down slightly. He cupped her chin with one hand and kissed her gently. "Wait for me. I'm going to get changed." "All right, go ahead." Shen Jilia propped himself up and took off his white coat as he walked inside. About 5 minutes later, Shen Jilia walked out. After changing into a new set of clothes, he felt refreshed and comfortable. Chapter 1814. When Yi Qianqian heard that, the nervousness that she had suppressed on the way over suddenly rose again. She asked, "Are we going to stay at your place?" "What else? I don't think that's a good idea. Isn't your family here?" "If not, where do you plan to live?" Shen Jilia glanced at her from the side and said faintly, "Am I supposed to let my woman stay in a hotel when she's here to meet my parents?" When Yi Qianqian heard this, she suddenly felt powerless to refute it. Shen Jilia held her in his arms and boldly walked forward. The doctors and nurses who came and went to greet her. They looked at Yi Qianqian as if she was a monster. The girls came forward to shake Yi Qianqian's hand. They all looked very surprised. "Oh my God, what a beautiful girl. Old Shen, is this your girlfriend?" "Ha ha ha, since Old Shen is enlightened, his girlfriend is so beautiful." The praises were all half true and half false. Yi Qianqian saw through it but didn't say anything. She was happy to be praised like that. Yi Qianqian's lips curled into a smile. She looked at them and greeted them one by one. "Hello everyone. My name is Yi Qianqian. Wow, that's a nice name. Which Shi is it? Is it the Shi of Hope? It's the west of east, west, south, north and south. Isn't that character called Shi? Yes, words with multiple pronunciations, ha ha ha." Yi Qianqian felt as if she had turned into a monkey. Even her face was stiff from all the smiling. She finally left the psychology department and headed down to the first floor. "You have too many colleagues," Yi Qianqian said as she rubbed her face and followed Shen Jilia to the underground parking lot. "Why are you so familiar with everyone? I'm smiling so much that my face is sore." Shen Jilia took out the keys and smiled. "Come on," he said. "You're still complaining? You don't know how happy you are." Yi Qianqian pouted and ran forward to hug his arm. "I didn't. But why are you so familiar with everyone? You're like a socialite." "That's right, you're a social butterfly. Otherwise, why would so many people praise you for your beauty?" Shen Jilia walked in the direction of his car. The logo on the key was a Buick. It looked very low-key. Shen Jilia placed the luggage in the trunk. Yi Qianqian opened the door and sat in the front passenger seat. She asked, "Is this car yours?" "It's my grandmother's." "Take it out and open it." "Your grandma can drive? She's so good." "Of course, my grandma is very advanced. When she heard that you were coming today, she prepared a lot of things for you." Yi Qianqian became even more nervous when she heard that. She looked at Shen Jilia and couldn't help but ask, "What is it?" "Food, entertainment, and a room. Tonight's activities have all been arranged for you." Shen Jilia smiled. He seemed to be in a good mood. He glanced at Yi Qianqian and started the car. "When you see my grandmother, you'll definitely like her." Yi Qianqian didn't dare compliment him. Yi Qianqian knew very well what kind of person old Mrs. Shen was. When Yi Yuyu was still in the Shen family, she had been bullied by this old lady. Now that it was him, how big of a change could there be? With that thought in mind, Yi Qianqian became afraid again and said, Shenjilia, why don't we go there tomorrow? After we're done, I'll go back to Kingstown. Chapter 18:15. In the future. We'll talk about it in the future. Yi Qianqian's voice grew softer and softer. She looked at Shenjulia's expression and stuck out her tongue. My sister married into your family. It's not like you don't know how your grandmother treated my sister. I think I should be more careful. When Shenjulia heard that, he felt both exasperated and amused. He retorted, how can that be the same? My brother and your sister had an ill-fated relationship. With that kind of relationship, there's no way they could have gotten married. How can you compare our situation to that of my brother and your sister? Why not? By the way, if your grandmother finds out that I'm Yi Yuyu's older sister, will she have a problem with me? She won't, Shenjilia said as he drove steadily. I've already spoken to Grandma. She knows who you are. Really? Of course. Otherwise, did you think I would bring you back just like that? Shenjilia was a little smug. He looked at the front of the car and slowly turned a corner. My parents are both at home. They've been wanting to see you. Don't be nervous later. Just talk normally and act like you normally do. Don't be shy. My grandmother and mother are very playful. My father may be a little more serious, but he's also easier to get along with. What about your brother? My brother isn't at home. It's okay. Even if he's at home, you don't have to worry about him at all. He doesn't know you to begin with. Perhaps when he sees you, he'll only think that you resemble Yi Yuyu a little. Haha. You really underestimate the relationship between me and your brother. I almost got into a fight with him. Have you forgotten? Shenjilia finally remembered after being reminded by Yi Qianqian. It seemed that, when Shen Manting had first gone missing, the smell of gunpowder between Shen Luo and Yi Qianqian had been quite strong. Although the matter had been resolved perfectly in the end, if the two of them were to meet now, it would definitely be a little awkward. Shenjilia smiled. Can you beat him? This guy looks gentle and weak, but he's actually quite skilled. Can you beat him? Me? Shenjilia laughed. Of course I can. If I can't even beat him, wouldn't I be too weak? Then why did you say that he's skilled? Tizke. It's more than enough to deal with you. Why do you have to deal with me? If you want to deal with someone, deal with my man. Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. The smile on Shenjilia's face widened. He nodded his head and exclaimed, You're finally enlightened. But I don't think I bought anything particularly good. Will your mom and grandma think my gift is shabby? What did you buy? I bought a set of skincare products for your mom. It's called Sea Blue Mystery or something. I don't really understand it, but I heard that mom uses it very well. I bought a ginseng for your grandma. My dad gave me the ginseng, and it's said to be 100-year-old ginseng. I also bought a bottle of wine for your dad. It's also made by my dad. He said it's 100-year-old wine. Shenjilia was surprised. He looked at her and asked, Is that all you've packed in your suitcase? I also have a change of clothes. I didn't bring anything else. Chapter 1816. I'm yours. Why do you still want a gift? Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. No, fine. I'll collect it myself tonight, Shenjilia said casually. Shenjilia was in a good mood. After turning the corner, he stopped the car in front of a large villa. When Yi Qianqian heard that, her face immediately turned red. She glared at him and cursed in a low voice. Pervert. What's wrong? What's in your head? You're calling me a pervert. I really don't know who's the pervert here. Shenjilia looked disgusted. He unbuckled his seatbelt and said, Get out of the car. Yi Qianqian looked around. The surrounding environment was very comfortable. In front of her was the facade of a luxurious villa. It looked very comfortable. To be able to have a villa in a place like the capital. Yi Qianqian secretly clicked her tongue and asked, Is this where you live? Yes. What's wrong? Shenjilia leaned over to help her unbuckle her seatbelt. As he asked, his eyes moved to her chest. Yi Qianqian was wearing a V-neck dress. The mint green color made the dress look especially fair. The collar was originally not low, but under the pressure of the seat belt, the fullness of her breasts was squeezed up. It looked very alluring. Yi Qianqian didn't notice her collar at all. When she saw Shenjilia's gaze, she immediately covered her chest and pushed his face away. She scolded. What are you looking at? You pervert. Shenjilia snorted and reached out. Yi Qianqian shrank back. Shenjilia immediately said, Don't move. I'll help you tidy up. When she heard that, Yi Qianqian immediately stopped moving. Shenjilia reached his hand out and slid it directly into her collar. He gave it a gentle rub. Yi Qianqian exclaimed. Her cheeks immediately turned red. She shouted, What are you doing? I'm helping you tidy up, Shenjilia said confidently. He suddenly opened his palm and took out a necklace. He gently placed it in front of Yi Qianqian. It was in the shape of a cherry blossom. The craftsmanship was very exquisite. Yi Qianqian was dazzled by the diamonds on it. When she saw it clearly, she blinked. Shenjilia was still in a very good mood. He said, It doesn't look good to have a bare neck. I'll help you put it on. Yi Qianqian reached out and touched it. It was warm. She could tell that Shenjilia had been holding it in his palm for a long time. She giggled and said, Can't you just give it to me? Am I not direct enough? Shenjilia's cheeks were a little red, but he maintained a serious expression and said, Here, I'll put it on for you. Yi Qianqian leaned over, and Shenjilia unbuttoned it and put it on. Yi Qianqian's skin was fairer. When she put on the rose gold necklace, Shenjilia felt that the woman in front of him was even more beautiful. Feeling pleased with himself, Shenjilia opened the car door and said, Let's go. Yi Qianqian became even more nervous. When she saw Shenjilia get out of the car, she opened the door as well. Just as Shenjilia retrieved his luggage and was about to bring her in, Yi Qianqian sensed that someone was watching her. He looked around but couldn't find anyone. Old Mrs. Shen stood on the second floor. The curtains next to the floor-to-ceiling windows were lightly drawn, perfectly concealing the old lady's aged but spirited body. Chapter 1817. When Nanny he heard the old lady's excited voice, she quickly put down her work and walked over to where the old lady was standing. He looked down and saw that the familiar car had indeed returned. Beside the car, Shenjilia held a suitcase in his hand. Beside him was a slender girl in a long dress. She looked like she had a good temperament. When Nanny he saw that, she was elated and said, Let's go down quickly. Haven't you been waiting for this for a long time? Let's go. Hey, I'm coming. You go down first. I have to take a look at the girl's face first. If she's not pretty, then forget it. The old lady held the binoculars and looked very excited. After staring for a long time, She finally saw the girl turn around. When she saw Yi Qianqian's face, the old lady finally slapped her thigh and exclaimed, "She's so pretty. I'll go down." Nanny he hadn't seen Yi Qianqian's face, but when she saw the old lady's excitement, she quickly picked up the binoculars to take a look. With one look, she saw that the girl was wearing a mint green dress. She looked quite tall and fair, but her head happened to be turned around, so she couldn't see her face. Feeling helpless and regretful, Nanny he had no choice but to go down. Yi Qianqian and Shen Julia lingered at the door for a while. After taking out the things that had been prepared for the elders from the suitcase, they walked inside. When they walked in, old Mrs. Shen happened to come down happily. Her eyes looked over. When she saw Yi Qianqian, she smiled kindly and said, "Oh, this must be Qianqian. You're so pretty." Yi Qianqian knew the old lady. Not only did she know her through Yi Yuyu, but she had also met her once or twice when she was in Kingstown. At that time, the old lady had been with Yu Lily the entire time. She was so focused on running away with Yu Lily that it was possible that she didn't remember Yi Qianqian at all. Yi Qianqian wasn't a person who liked to get close to people. She laughed and nodded her head. "Yes, Grandma. I've heard about you for a long time. Juliet, that brat, has been hiding you like a secret. He's afraid that I'll eat you up." As the old lady spoke, she glared at Shen Julia with a pair of reproachful eyes. Then she stepped forward and took Yi Qianqian's hand affectionately. She said, "I heard that you and Yi Yuyu are sisters. You look so much alike. But you have good luck. You are good-looking and have a plump face. Oh, this is a blessed face." Old Mrs. Shen was elated. Come, come, come. Take a seat. Julia, pour some tea." Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed by the compliment. She subconsciously glanced at Shen Julia. Shen Julia, on the other hand, was smiling. He seemed to be in a good mood. When he turned around, Nanny he had already served the tea. He studied Yi Qianqian's face and remarked, "They really look alike. They're practically carved from the same mold as Yuyu. They're like twins." Ahem. We are twins, yes, but we are fraternal. She looks more like my father. Do you look more like your mother? This was the first time Shen Julia had heard of it. Yi Qianqian shook her head. I also look like my father. Chapter 1818. Old Mrs. Shen knew that the Yi family's parents had divorced a long time ago. Furthermore, they did not have a good relationship with Yi Tian. That was why she had spoken up. After saying this, she moved closer to him mysteriously and whispered, "Let me tell you, most people don't like women with this kind of appearance. They like women with round faces like yours. You look so beautiful and blessed." Yi Qianqian smiled and blushed. "Grandma, this is a tonic that Qianqian specially brought for you. It's obvious that it's very old. Take a look." Shen Julia took out the ginseng that he had specially prepared for the old lady. "Look at how thoughtful my wife is." Old Mrs. Shen was delighted. She patted Yi Qianqian's hand and said, "It's great that you're here. You even brought a gift. You're too kind." However, he couldn't help but take a few glances at it. He brought it over and sniffed it. His eyes lit up. "This is good. This thing is hard to buy. Even if you have the money, you might not be able to buy it. My father made it himself. It's been there for a long time, but I heard that it's been preserved very well, so I brought it to you. I knew it. Treasures of this level are all collector's items. So it really is a collector's item. Of course, I have brought you the best." Shen Julia closed the lid with a smug look on his face. Qianqian put in a lot of effort on this trip. She brought tonics and tonic wine. She even brought good things for Mom and Dad. Old Mrs. Shen was even happier. She nodded and said, "You're so sensible. By the way, Qianqian, I heard that you're painting? No, Grandma, I was just staring at other people drawing, for example. In the beginning, Yi Qianqian was still a little nervous, but as she spoke, her words became smoother and smoother. In the end, he and the old lady laughed together, and after a while, they became one. Shenjilia had been worried that she might not be used to it, but it was obvious that he had been overthinking things. Old Mrs. Shen was an old fox. After chatting with Yi Qianqian for a long time, she pulled her into her room and said that she wanted to talk about something private. How could Shenjilia not let her go? He could only watch helplessly as his woman was dragged away. There were guests at home today. Shen Longyue and Mrs. Shen came home very early. As soon as he entered, Nanny he had already started preparing dinner. Madame Shen asked impatiently, "Where is he?" "He's inside." Grandma took him away. "He's in the room." Madame Shen grinned from ear to ear and said, Okay. I'll go in and take a look. Mom will help you check." "You don't need to check. I've already proposed to her anyway. When I'm ready, we'll go get the certificate." When Mrs. Shen heard this, her heart calmed down. She smiled warmly and quickly walked in. On the other hand, Shen Longyue stepped forward and hooked his arm around his son's shoulder. He laughed heartily and said, "Good boy, quietly doing something big." "Of course, I have to treat my wife seriously. Once it's confirmed, it's confirmed. You're not changing it." "Bah, what the heck? Where can I find such a good girl next time?" Shen Longyue laughed heartily, his face full of ridicule. "Then I want to see what kind of girl can make our second young master Shen so infatuated." Shenjilia smiled smugly. "You like it too." In old Mrs. Ye's room, old Mrs. Yi was reading Yi Qianqian's palm. She frowned and asked, "Qianqian darling, has your hand been injured before? This palm reading doesn't seem right." Chapter 1819. Suddenly, Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She looked at her palm. It didn't look any different from usual. What's wrong? Yi Qianqian's heart was a little uneasy. Looking at the old lady, she felt a little strange. She had heard of the old lady's mysterious ways. She had heard that she was a big believer in all kinds of nonsense. If she found out that something was wrong, she would never let it go. Yi Yuyu was a living example. If it weren't for the old lady, Yi Yuyu and Shen Luo might still be married. Although Yi Yuyu was happier with Li Jinnan than with Shen Luo, and was Yi Yuyu's first love. They had grown up together, and they had been in love for a long time. It was only right and proper for them to be together. Guan Kui had stayed in the hospital and hadn't interfered with them. Without the old lady's opposition, Shen Luo might have slowly discovered the good in Yi Yuyu, and their relationship would have slowly improved. Then Yi Yuyu and Shen Luo could be together forever. However, the ideal was perfect, but in reality, the old lady was right in between them. When she heard the old lady's words, Yi Qianqian had a bad feeling. "Your hand." Old Mrs. Shen's frown deepened. "It looks pretty good. It looks rich and powerful. When were you born?" Well, Yi Qianqian thought about it and decided to tell her birthday. "What time is it?" "It should be around midnight. Your 8 characters are a bit sinister, but your appearance is still not quite the same as Yuyu's. Your face is more rich and noble. Overall, you look quite blessed. But why is your hand broken in the middle? It looks a little unlucky." Yi Qianqian's heart beat faster. She asked, "Grandma, what do you mean?" "To put it bluntly, it's a sign of a short life." When Yi Qianqian heard that, her hand shrank back in fear. "A short life?" Yi Qianqian was a little scared. "Does that mean I don't have long to live?" "I don't know much about palmistry, but from what I can see, the one with the best fate is Eulili. You know Eulili, don't you?" When old Mrs. Shen mentioned Eulili, she smiled happily. Lily, this child, was not very lucky before she turned 25. But after she turned 25, everything went smoothly for her. Yi Qianqian had heard you Lily mention it before. For a moment, she felt a little awkward and said, I seem to have heard Lily mention it before. It said that she's going to give birth to a son and a daughter. Lily recently went for a prenatal checkup, and it seems to be a child. Yes, Lily will give birth to a son and a daughter. I'm telling you, I'm a half-fairy. What I say can't be wrong. As old Mrs. Shen spoke, her eyes looked up and down Yi Qianqian's palm. She looked left and right before finally putting Yi Qianqian's hand down. Qianqian, can you tell Grandma if your hand was injured or was it born like this? Well, I was probably born like this. Yi Qianqian glanced at her palm. There was a faint red line on it. If one didn't look closely, they wouldn't be able to tell that this red line was different from other palm prints. Yi Qianqian stared at it for a long time before saying, I'm guessing that this is a birthmark. Dash. Chapter 1820. Ever since Yi Qianqian could remember, this red line had been following her. Yi Qianqian had never doubted the origin of this red line. It was as if she had eyes and a nose since she was young. Yi Qianqian felt that it was a very normal thing. But how did this little red line become the sign of a short life in the old lady's mouth? Old Mrs. Shen nodded her head. There was an indescribable expression on her face. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Yi Qianqian and the old lady looked over at the same time. A lady who looked to be in her 40s or 50s walked in. It was obvious that she had taken good care of herself. Her exquisite makeup made her look very comfortable. Her eyes bore some resemblance to Shen Jilia's. She was probably Shen Jilia's mother. Mrs. Shen walked in and closed the door behind her. She stared at Yi Qianqian and approached her with a smile. This must be Qianqian. Hello, I'm Jilia's mother. Yi Qianqian had guessed it. When she heard that, she quickly stood up and greeted, Hello, Auntie. Sit down. Don't stand on ceremony with me. Mrs. Shen pressed Yi Qianqian back onto the sofa and said warmly, I've heard Jilia talk about you for a long time. I heard that you're an especially adorable and straightforward girl. You're pretty and have a good personality. It's great that our Jilia met you. Yi Qianqian's mood was already a little sour after old Mrs. Shen said that she would have a short life. When she heard Mrs. Shen's compliment, it was difficult for her to be happy. She laughed and said, He's just spouting nonsense. I'm not that good. How can you spout nonsense? I believe in my son. If he says you're not bad, then you're definitely not bad. Old Mrs. Shen looked at them and stood up. Keep Qianqian company. I'm going out for a while. Mom, it's time for dinner. Where are you going? I'm going to Old Lee's house. You guys go ahead and eat. Don't wait for me. Old Mrs. Shen waved her hand and walked out. Yi Qianqian didn't know why, but she felt a little strange. Old Mrs. Shen seemed to be treating her coldly. Was it an illusion? Yi Qianqian subconsciously looked at the red line on her palm. She clenched her fist and let it fall. Granny Shen was gone for quite a long time. Mrs. Shen led Yi Qianqian to the study. The two of them chatted for a long time. Shen Jilia could clearly hear their laughter coming from the study. Shen Longyue was sitting in the living room, talking to Shen Jilia. When he heard the crisp laughter, he couldn't help but laugh. Your girlfriend is amazing. It's rare for your mother to be this happy. Shen Jilia was very pleased with himself. Of course. Don't you know whose son chose her as his wife? Shen Longyue's smile widened. He pointed at Shen Jilia and said, You only know how to suck up. Isn't that the truth? Like father, like son. You can find such a good wife like my mother. How can I lose? Got it. Hurry up and call your mother and future wife to eat. Shinjulia turned his head and saw that Nanny he had already prepared the meal. He immediately stood up and said, "Yes, sir." When Shinjulia walked in, he realized that the two women were reading a book. When Shinjulia got closer, he could clearly see the nude photo of himself. Chapter 1821. When Shinjulia saw it, he immediately felt uncomfortable. He rushed forward to cover the photo and shouted, "D***, Mom. What are you doing?" Mrs. Shin laughed out loud and said, "What are you doing? Photos are meant for people to see. What are you being shy about?" Yi Qianqian laughed out loud and said, "I didn't know you were so cute when you were a child. Oh my, I'm so shy." Shinjulia's face turned bright red. He immediately snatched the photo album away with a dark expression and said, "When was this taken? Why didn't I know about it?" "When you were 13, you sneaked out to the reservoir to swim and didn't come back for the whole morning. Everyone was scared out of their wits. Later, your father got angry and stripped you naked and threw you out at the door." Mrs. Shin laughed so hard that tears almost came out of her eyes. "At that time, you were still outside and refused to admit your mistake. At that time, there was no one walking around the door. Your brother went to take a picture of you as a souvenir. How could you forget such a deep impression?" "I forgot." Shinjulia's face was redder than it had ever been. He hid the photo album and said, "Let's go eat." "Why are you looking at photos?" Yi Qianqian laughed even more wildly and said, "Your face is so red. It looks like it's real." "Shut up." Shinjulia went forward and pulled her up. "Let's eat." Before Yi Qianqian could catch her breath, she was pulled out by Shinjulia. Mrs. Shin looked at them from behind with a gratified expression. Yi Qianqian was pulled out, but she still recklessly pulled the photo album and said, "I haven't finished looking at it." "You're not allowed to look at it. How dare you look at my nude photos with my mother? Shameless. Go away. I didn't see anything." When Shinjulia heard that, he reached out and pulled her into his arms. He whispered in her ear, "It's okay. I'll show you everything later." When Yi Qianqian heard that, her face immediately turned red. She glared at him and said, "Shameless. How am I shameless? Don't look at it if you have the guts." As he spoke, he leaned over, not caring that he was in his own home. Yi Qianqian pinched his waist and gritted her teeth. "Your mother is still behind us." It didn't hurt, but Shinjulia wanted to wail and say, "Oh my, I'm trying to murder my husband." Her voice wasn't soft, and Yi Qianqian was startled. She turned to look at Mrs. Shun. Mrs. Shun could not help but laugh as she looked at them ambiguously with a smile. Yi Qianqian's face grew hotter, and she pushed him away. "Get lost." Shinjulia quickly leaned forward again. "Why are you scramming? This is my house. Come on, I'll take you to wash your hands and have dinner." The two of them pulled each other into the kitchen. Yi Qianqian felt extremely awkward and whispered, "Can you restrain yourself a little? Your parents are here." "Restrain what?" Shinjulia pressed his head against her shoulder and said in a low voice, "I'm already very restrained. I almost kissed you when I was hugging you just now." Yi Qianqian felt even more humiliated. She turned her head and said, "You." Before she could say anything, Shinjulia suddenly leaned in and planted a kiss on her lips. His voice was very loud, and Yi Qianqian was stunned. She immediately reacted and reached out to pat him. Shinjulia took a step back and held her hand with a smile. He said, all right. Let's wash our hands." Shen Longyue and his wife, as well as Nanny He, were all watching from behind. Chapter 1822. I heard she's Yu's older sister? Shen Longyue looked at his wife and said, they do look alike, but Qianqian's face is a little rounder. Yes, Mom seems to like her very much. She had a good chat with her in the room just now. When Shen Longyue heard that, he smiled and nodded his head. He looked at Yi Qianqian and Shen Julia, who were washing their hands in the kitchen. Mom rarely likes a young girl so much. It's not easy. Mrs. Shen looked at her husband with a smile and said softly, let's go wash our hands and eat. Shen Longyue smiled, stood up, and reached out to his wife. Mrs. Shen blushed slightly, but she still reached out and put her hand on her husband's palm. Yi Qianqian and Shen Julia quickly finished washing their hands and sat down. The more Nanny He looked at the girl, the more she liked her. She said, Qianqian, these are all dishes from Auntie He's hometown. They're all Auntie's specialties. Try them. Yi Qianqian smiled. Yes. Thank you, Auntie He. Nanny He, why don't you sit down and eat with us? Shen Julia patted the stool next to him. Mother He looked flattered. She waved her hands and said, no, no, no. Forget it. Old Madam won't be happy if she sees it. Shen Julia understood and didn't want to force her. When Yi Qianqian saw this, her understanding of the old lady became even more horrified. This old lady looked a little scary. When Yi Qianqian recalled what the old lady had said about her short life, she felt a little uncomfortable. Nanny He brought Yi Qianqian a bowl of rice. Feeling a little embarrassed, Yi Qianqian asked, Grandma isn't back yet. Aren't you going to wait for her? No need, let's eat first. Mrs. Shen waved her hand. Your grandmother is always like this. She often goes out and doesn't see anyone. Sometimes she will eat at a friend's house. We don't have to worry about her. Yi Qianqian nodded. But in his heart he couldn't help but think. What if the old lady came back when they were halfway through eating? Would she say that he didn't know the rules and didn't show filial respect to his elders? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. When she saw that everyone in the family was used to it, she slowly began to eat. Because of Shen Julia's presence, Yi Qianqian didn't feel too restrained when she ate. All of a sudden, Yi Qianqian felt a warm sensation on her leg, and she shivered involuntarily. Her heart raced as she turned to look at Shen Julia. Shen Julia's expression was natural as he calmly ate his meal. Yi Qianqian pushed his hand away. At the same time, she felt someone looking at her. She looked up and saw that it was Madame Shen. Her face heated up, and she immediately lowered her head. The next moment, she felt another itch between her legs. She immediately clamped down, and her whole body went numb. She turned around and glared at Shen Julia. Who would have thought that Shen Julia's expression would be so calm and composed? Feeling her gaze, he turned around and smiled brightly. Yi Qianqian was at a loss for words. She glared at him fiercely. Mrs. Shen noticed and asked, "What's wrong?" Shen Julia smiled and said, "She loves me too much." Yi Qianqian glared at him and quickly lowered her head with a red face. She reached out and pinched Shen Julia's thigh hard. Shen Julia wailed. Mrs. Shen asked again, "What's wrong?" Shen Julia smiled brightly. "Mom, it's nothing. Let's eat." Chapter 1823. But she didn't expose him. She lowered her head and continued eating. Yi Qianqian felt that she was about to become a slut. In public, she actually, it was all Shen Julia's fault. Fortunately, Shen Julia's parents seemed to be easy to deal with. She was afraid that if Shen Julia's grandmother came back and saw it, would she lowered her head and blushed as she quietly finished her meal. Other than the few times when Shen Julia would reach out and touch her, everything else seemed quite harmonious. Fortunately, old Mrs. Shen still didn't come back after they finished eating. After Yi Qianqian finished eating, she was about to help Nanny He clear the dishes when Shen Julia pulled her away. Shinjulia's parents were looking at them ambiguously, which made Yi Qianqian feel even more guilty. Could it be that the old couple had seen all those small movements just now? Yi Qianqian's cheeks were burning as she was pulled away. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. Once they were out the door, Yi Qianqian retracted her hand and asked, "What were you doing just now?" "Huh? What do you mean what?" Shinjulia played dumb. He blinked his eyes and looked at Yi Qianqian with an aggrieved expression. Yi Qianqian's face was still warm. She hit his hand hard again and said, "Your mother and father are still here, and you're touching me all over. I keep feeling like your mother is watching me." "I wasn't touching you all over. Don't accuse me wrongly," Shinjulia exclaimed with his arms crossed. "Besides, isn't that how you usually eat? I'm used to it." Shinjulia's words made Yi Qianqian feel even more ashamed. She roared, "Pfft! You're shameless. You're not usually like that." "I am. You're just used to it and can't feel it." "I'm not. Don't tell me you're always touching a girl's leg and suddenly forgot who you're doing it with." Yi Qianqian narrowed her eyes and looked at him suspiciously. "Pfft! Pfft! How could that be? I only have you. You can't suspect me." Shinjulia held Yi Qianqian in his arms and quickly began to express his loyalty. Yi Qianqian looked at him and snorted, but she couldn't help but smile. Shinjulia saw the smile on her face and his lips curled up. He leaned forward and kissed her. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively looked to her left and right. After confirming that there was no one around, she pinched his waist again and said, "You're so annoying. We're on the main road. What if someone sees us?" "What's wrong with being seen? I'm kissing my own girlfriend, can't I?" He held Yi Qianqian's hand and pulled her into his arms. "No one usually comes here. Give me a kiss." Yi Qianqian's eyes lit up. "No." Yi Qianqian turned to leave. How could Shinjulia allow that? He pulled her over and held her in his arms. Then he kissed her passionately. Shinjulia skillfully penetrated her and squeezed her tighter and tighter. Yi Qianqian struggled for a moment, but it was futile. She looked to her left and right to make sure no one was coming before she closed her eyes. As she passively endured such a passionate kiss, Yi Qianqian felt an unprecedented sense of excitement. This was the first time he had acted so presumptuously on the main road. If someone saw this, it would definitely be very awkward. "Ayaya, isn't this our neighbor little Shenshen?" A teasing voice sounded like that of a woman. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively pushed Shinjulia away. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.